give people some time to kind of get all in on it, everything. So close some stuff out and get some stuff prepped. If anybody joins, anyways. If people join, great. If not, well, there's always next time. Let's close some stuff out. And I use this to make sure that I've got everything I need at the right resolution. Scooch that over there. Do that. And there we go. I can see what's actually going on. Let's see. Stream is healthy. There should be excellent. I fixed my network settings. Alright. I also go to YouTube. Share this with the community if anybody wants to join. That'd be cool. Maybe. Go here, let's see. Alright, that seems to be working. That seems to be working. Alright. Ooh, if I could type, that'd be great. It would also be great if I shared the URL. There we go. Okay. Hopefully people will join. It's nice when people join. It's fun when people join. Hey Martin, no problem. Enjoy your dinner. Enjoy some family time. That's a little bit more important than a live stream, but if you're able to join, please do. Let's do a new project here. And we're actually going to close that. We don't need that open anymore. Actually, we do need it open. Forget it's gonna resize itself here. Let's there we go. All right, now we can close that. I'll try to be better at actually monitoring the live chat as well. So thank you, Martin, for commenting, and welcome. If you are able to get back, that would be awesome. Don't know how long this will take. The last one I did was about an hour and some odd minutes, so you might have some time, but if not, there is always next time. Alrighty, so let's start here. I wanted to do a kind of like from start to finish kind of build with everything that I would normally do for like a project that I'm working on for somebody or just a personal project. I want to want to make a mountain, maybe some plains, bluff looking areas. I'm not entirely sure. I want to do something that I'm not typically used to doing, or that I don't typically do, just so you guys can follow along on something new. Everybody can make mountains. Whether or not they look good or realistic is totally subjective, but anybody can make mountains. I want to try to focus on something that not a lot of people end up really doing. And that's going to take some experimentation. So there's going to be a lot of experimentation in this, I imagine. I don't want it to be too experimental, just because I don't want to bore you guys. But in any case, let's start. So a good one that I like to use when I'm using flat areas is igneous. And you can see why here in just a sec. You might say, what? That's not very flat. Matter of fact, we have a lot of mountain-esque looking areas, but that's because we're going to, assuming I can find a good seed that'll work well. I also want to use channels. I'm going to select channels here. I want to increase the scale as well as do some editing down here. So let's go ahead and increase the scale. Let's start at 50%, just to start. You might have to lower the, well, I guess the power is going to be already pretty low. And then maybe, can we lower the power? No, 1's about as low as it's going to get. So let's go ahead and just find another random seed. We're going to try to find one that is relatively uniform. That one's not too bad. We do have some low areas and high areas that are way different from each other, but that's fine. We're going to, not level, sorry, we want to clamp. We want to reduce the max. Now the reason why I like using igneous is because igneous provides these really cool features, like these channels that you see here, like this one, and then a lot of surface detail, a lot of noise in the pattern, and this will be really flat and hilly, so it's not very tall. We might have to go a little bit lower on the max scale. Let's go down to 15. 15 might work. Okay. So we're going to stick with this for just a minute. Now, back during the geoglyph days, I did something similar where I used igneous and then I used a filter called swirl. And I got a really cool effect out of it. And it looked like lava flow, but I colored it differently, so it looked like it was like a sand dune-ish type setting. So we're going to, let's increase this so we get some effect here. And I actually duplicated it twice. I used 2 of them, and I off-centered it a little bit from each other. So what I did is I went like this, and then so if this is, we got to do something on the X, Y, I think, or maybe not. Or maybe the scale's too large. There we go. So that scale could be rather large. This one we're gonna shift. It's shifting. It's got to use a lot of degrees or percentages here. There we go. That one I use quite a bit. All right, so let's actually go all the way up here on this one. So it's way over here. So we have this one that's more over here, and this one that's more over here. Maybe a little less on the X. Yeah, about right there. So we get this flow looking thing, and then we combine it. I don't know if Martin's listening or not. Probably eating still, but I'll just, it's all good, sir. Sir. Sorry if I clear my throat a lot. It is allergy season, and I suffer greatly from allergies, so I apologize in advance. Now we're just going to look through here. I think if we do add, and then boost it all the way up, we can get some really cool effect. Yeah. So we kind of broke it up a little bit. So from this to this, just kind of broke it up. Add, we'll come back to that because that actually doesn't look half bad. that actually looks pretty cool too. But we are losing some detail, and it is now zeroed out on the edges, which isn't bad, but it made it too flat as well. So we're not going to stick with subtract. Definitely not max, or not max, but whatever. Divide. That might work as well. We'll come back to that. So I think our best one is going to be add. So we get a little bit more depth in our landscape from before. So we kind of went from a really flat to a less flat. So what I want to do here again is add a clamp. Actually, you know what? We could add this shaper option and make these peaks more peaky, I guess. I can't remember which side it is. I think it's this side. No, it's this side. There we go. So if you go back and watch my shaper node video, I made it shortly after it was released because it's probably one of the more powerful nodes that we have in Gaea, where you can take a landscape and totally reshape it without having to change the base seed and noise. And it's really awesome. So if we wanted to, we can have this, but we could also have something like this, which would give us our flat and whatever that channel option is. We got our channels coming in, but that's a little bit too flat. So if we were to reduce that, we can bring in some of that more detail. And now we have more of a hilly look, especially after we add our erosion to it. So we could stick with this for a minute. We can come back to this at any time. All of this is destructive unless you change the seeds. If you change the seeds of all your base nodes, it'll reshape it. And when I say reshape it, not like using the reshaper, but it'll change the seed. That's about as destructive as it gets. So we could always come back to these at a later time as long as we don't really change the seeds. So let's go ahead and just stick with this for now, and then if we want to make it more peaky looking, we can come back to the reshaper node, or the shaper option here. We can add the node if we wanted, make it a little bit more accessible that way, but we don't want to have a whole lot of nodes on our graph. If we can eliminate the amount of nodes we have, our builds at the end will be longer. So we can just stick with some of the basic options that we have in Shaper, like the actual Shaper option. There we go. Let's see, we got some Houdini Gaea Bridge export resolution issue. Please describe it. Please demonstrate it. I don't actually have Houdini. I apologize. I did have it, but I no longer have it. I cannot afford to have it. I guess I have an older version of it, but I don't know how the older version plays with newer versions of Gaea, because I actually haven't used Houdini in maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe 5. So I don't know anything about that issue, but if you want to, you can get in contact with Quad Spinner. They might be able to let you know what they're working on with that if it's still a problem. But for now, probably just going to stick around with playing around with Octane and Cinema 4D and that workflow for the time being. I can come back to that later if I pick up Houdini again. Okay. So we reshaped our landscape. Now we have more of this hilly bluff area. So let's add our erosion. I think what we're going to do first is we're going to use breaker. I always like to use breaker as a base, just so we can break up the landscape a bit, as you can see here. Just kind of breaks it all up. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I wish I knew more about the Houdini issue, and I wish I used more of Houdini, but I just don't. So I apologize. And let's use hard cracks, and we're going to use the accurate option here. And that's about all I ever do with breaker, because the default settings are actually really good for the majority of what I use them for, what I use it for. But you can change whatever you want here, really. If you wanted to increase these like breakup areas, increase the river length. If you want to change the depth of them, just go ahead and change the depth so they're more deep in the landscape, breaks them up a little bit more. As you can see here. After a while though, breaker does start looking a little bit wonky and ridiculous, but you can get some really good effects if you stack it. So what I mean by that is if you use something ridiculous like this for breaker, if you throw something in like another breaker, and change the seed and use similar settings, so like hard cracks and accurate. And then you can take the combine here, throw in the mask, and that kind of helps. Not much in this case, so that might not be the best idea. Maybe we can do this where we have 2 breakers stacked and we combine that like that. Then use something like 100% and screen. Maybe not screen. Let's look around here. Maybe a good one would be max or even minimum. Let's see. We have that and that, and then we can use the mask here. So yeah, that works pretty well. So if you use minimum, kind of mask in the details from the combine node here. That's separation, sorry. Of course that can work, but obviously it did, but it's not ideal. But anyways, you can do that so you have these really deep grooves and it doesn't have the weird wonky artifacts, and then at the end of that throw in another erosion. And what that'll do is it'll fill in these river valleys with data info, erosion info, but then you're left with these. And these are no bueno. So if you play around with it a little bit, you can probably get something super interesting, but because I don't want to be too experimental here, I'm just going to use 1 breaker. That's just kind of a food for thought kind of process for you. And I'm going to actually get rid of this breaker and go back to the default. There's it right there. Except for hard cracks and accurate. That's about all I ever change. Let's delete that one and plug that one in. There we go. All right. So now we got a pretty clean graph here. We got our little river valleys coming in and our erosion. Now for the erosion, I'm going to decrease the duration to 2 because I don't want that much erosion coming in. I have other ways that I want to erode this. And there we have it. We have these cool grooves coming in. Gives our landscape a little interesting detail, like some scars on the surface a little bit. And we have some nice rolling hills here. Another way you can make those hills, if you don't want to go about doing this, is throw in a purlin. Oops. Purlin. And then change the purlin noise to billowy. And then just increase the scale a bit. And there you go. That's kind of similar to what we're doing here, except we're putting in a little bit more formation depth in our landscape because we're using these swirl nodes. So it just kind of changes the landscape around a bit. And then this is what we get. Something a little bit more interesting. Alright, so now that we got that erosion in, we just want it to be a very minimal amount. So even this might be too much. So I'm going to decrease the strength a tad bit, maybe 35. There we go. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to try to use one of these newer nodes. So fractal terrace. But we're going to be kind of selective with this depending on how it looks. Yeah, we want to be just a tad bit more selective with this. So let's do a height right here. And let's attach it to the mask here for the fractal terraces. And I'm going to line these up just so they look nice and clean. And move this over a bit. Sorry, I am really picky when it comes to my graphs. If I can't read it easily, then it's going to bother me. Alright, so we have our height here. So we want to select a maximum and a minimum here. And if we normalize it, we'll make that selection a little bit harder. And then that way we can actually see where we're selecting a little bit easier. So we want it to appear kind of in this range a little bit, and then maybe a little more fall off, so like 20% fall off. Let's see what that looks like. yeah, we get these weird looking areas, which really wouldn't be too bad, but they poke up like this, and I don't like that. So we're really focusing on this area quite a bit. We should be focusing over here a little bit more as well, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to change some of this stuff here for our fractals, just so we can change it up a bit. Let's change the seed first to see what we get. That is actually more of what I was thinking. That one seed change. But let's say we found a seed that didn't work. What do we want to change here? We could change... So if the octaves is like the detail, the amount of detail in the noise, if we decrease that, then obviously we get very little detail. If we increase that, we get more detail, which means that we get a few bit more terraces coming in. And this actually looks pretty nice. So one more thing you can do is change the default octaves from whatever it was to a higher level or lower, depending on your needs. And then maybe changing the spacing, which will be the spacing between the terraces. So if we increase that, we get more spacing. If we decrease that, actually it's the opposite. We get more spacing this way, and then we get less spacing this way. So there's more in between. It's hard to see here because we have such a minor effect. So let's find something in between here. And I think that might do. And then let's just play around with intensity here. So the intensity be like the strength of the effect, which we don't want that. Oops. We don't want that to be too high because now we're starting to dig into our landscape a bit over here on these what we call foothills. A lot of people in Utah around the Wasatch Front, that's where I live, live on these foothills. So there'll be like a big old mountain, and then there'll be like these foothills from where Lake Bonneville was that kind of made these shorelines, and people will live on these foothills. It's about where I live too, is on one of those foothills, but in a different area. Alright, that's looking pretty decent. So, let's see, we got our cracks still, we got our erosion. Now what we want to do is we want to add just a tiny bit more erosion, but we're not going to use the basic erosion. We want to use something that kind of breaks up the terraces a bit. And I'm thinking sediment might do. There we go. Sediment just kind of fills in the gaps with sediment. Makes it a little bit more grainy. You can add a drift, and then that way the sediment only appears on certain edges rather than across the entire landscape uniformly. However, this is nice, but it's not what we need. We need something that breaks up the erosion a bit more. Sediment kind of hides it because of the sediment covering it, but it doesn't break it up. So we want to maybe add some micro erosions, but not that many. And we only want to have it appear where our terraces are. There we go. So we go from that to that, and you can see how it breaks it up a bit more. And it's not much. It's very minor. And you'll notice that we're not using extremely overblown settings here on our landscape because we want it to look as natural at a lower resolution. That way, when we increase the resolution, some of these nodes are dependent on resolution, especially erosion. So if you were to make something that looks extremely, I don't know, otherworldly, while you're building out your landscape at a lower resolution, when you increase the resolution, like we'll do here, it could really make your landscape look really weird and wonky. So you don't want to just throw out a bunch of erosion on your landscape and then call it good, because it's going to change when you build it out at a higher resolution. And you'll see here the micro erosion adds all these tiny little erosion pieces to our landscape. So if we were to look at it before, just very small amounts. If you look right in this area, just enough to break it up. You don't need a whole lot of erosion to do that. All right, so we have this area that we've kind of looked at for a while, and it looks quite nice. So hey Tio, thank you, sir. I hope I do really well. Hopefully I teach you guys some stuff. Anyways, sorry if I'm dragging on. This is a live stream, and it's just mostly me testing stuff out. So if you get bored, I apologize, but we are building stuff, and I will be showing the workflow in Gaea to Cinema 4D using Octane. So stick around if you would like. You can follow along as well. That's what I used to do a long time ago, is I would just follow along with people building stuff out, and that's how I learned. That's how I learned personally, but I mean, to each their own. Alright, so we got our micro erosion going around the edges here. That's nice. It's very small amounts. Don't need a whole lot. Now, if we wanted to add something here, over in this area, if you have a couple ways we can do that, an easy way to do it is a way that I haven't actually used often, and that's to use the mask option. So if we just take our micro erosion and throw in a mask, Gaea is really nice this way because you can edit a mask here, and all this is doing is you use your 2D view here, which is nice. You can do it in your, or you used to be able to do it in your 3D view, but in your 2D view it'll probably be easier if we increase the size here. That'll increase the size of our little red I don't know, reticle, and then we just paint like this over in this area. That'll make a mask, and then from here we can output what we need. So if we were to throw in something like, and again, I haven't used this very much, so let's experiment. Now we have our mask there. Whoops, I didn't want to move all of Gaea. Our mountain, god damn it, I am doing the same thing. Our mountain is where our mask is. And if we go back to the mask, we can iterate it, which should make it more smooth and fade in a little bit. If we change the power, that'll just make it so it's a little bit, again, more faded. That way it's not as strong. But let's go ahead and keep that around 1, which I think is a good default value for pretty much everything with experimenting. And then we'll just keep the iterations where they are at 64, or at 4, sorry. And so the problem here, though, is now that we did that, we have lost the rest of our landscape. So we need to fix that. We need to combine it back in. So let's take our micro erosion and let's throw in a combine. And I'm going to drop this down here. I like to keep things nice and clean, so I apologize while I clean this up. There we go. And we're going to bring this out, and then we're just going to drop that in there. Now our mountain's in there, but we have a different issue. We need the mountain to appear a little bit larger, and probably a little more mountain-esque. So let's play around with our options here. We want to make sure that the ratio is high, and I believe if we use max, that will probably be the best option, but I think add in this case might be better. If we look at our erosion here, all we're doing is adding in that mountain with our mask, and we're good. And it's blending nicely with our landscape, so that's nice. So what we need to do now is just change our mountain. So if we were to kind of just play around with these options, you know, that can't really tell you what the differences are between A, B, C, and D. At one point I probably could have, but I have since lost that knowledge, and I haven't gone back to find it again. So just kind of play around with these different types until you find one that you like. And mountain might not even be the best option. We could probably go with igneous again if we wanted to, or we could draw if you wanted to. This is also a fun one. So if we put draw in there, put the mask in there, and then click on the guides. So if anybody remembers Geo Control, a long time ago, back before it is now World Creator, I believe, Geo Control, you used what was called ISO lines or ESO lines, and you would just draw them out, and Geo Control will draw your landscape, kind of like what we're doing now. So we can draw out our little mountain range and more little mountain ranges, and you can do that wherever you want inside of your play area. And it was really nice. It made making a landscape for a game engine super easy, because all you would do is you would increase the size of your easel line, outline the edges like this to create your landscape, and that will fill it all in like this. In this case, we have to increase some features, but you can see how we're getting some in here. And then what would happen is at that point, you would just draw in minor details wherever. But in this case, yeah, we don't really care much to do that. So we're just going to clear that out. And again, you could draw. That's a nice way of doing things. But in this case, I'm not a good draw. I don't draw well. So that would look really bad. There's a reason why I use fractal-based procedural building blocks, tools, whatever you want to call them, because I suck at drawing. I couldn't even draw a stick person. So we'll just stick with this mask, and if you wanted to, if this looks a little bit too bland, you can always go back and edit the mask and then add some more details in like this somehow to make it look like a really happy dude, I guess. Getting a little foot out here, so we got 2 arms. Looks like Kirby, maybe Kirby. Anyways, I don't know if you guys will catch that reference or not, but that's what we have. All right, so let's just kind of sprawl stuff. Oh my gosh, I did it again. I'm such a moron. All right, that might sprawl it out a bit too much. Maybe let's go back and look at this combined. It's not too bad. We might want to change it around a bit. So let's change the seed. When in doubt, just change the seed. And then we can also change the scale, so it's, this is going to make it look more flat, I guess. We can do this to make it look more peaky. And I don't think mountains, I'm just not filling it with mountain, so let's throw something else in. Something nice might be plates. I like using plates. I was a big fan of plates when I was testing out Gaea. I used it in almost every scene, and I still do in almost every scene. That is way too much. Let's reduce that quite a bit. And let's also throw in some slants. Change the seed around, and we might need to change the scale so we get more stuff coming in. More of these details that I'm looking at right here. And I'm just not feeling it with any of these two. It might just be my mask selection. I mean, that could totally be it. And give them eyeballs if you want. That's the eraser, by the way. You can erase your mask. So let's just erase it. And let's start over. So let's not use the eraser. And let's just draw from here going out like this. This might look a little better. So it kind of sprawls across the top. There. Gotta be careful. There we go. And then we'll just throw out some leaf areas like this. You can reduce the size so we get more fine detail. That might be better. Let's try that. And then let's add just some basic Perlin noise. When in doubt, go to Perlin noise. And let's clamp this so it fits in. All right. Combine it. Yeah, let's look a little better. I think I can get behind that. Now let's go ahead and do another thing here. Let's so a good rule of thumb is to just kind of add and stack and add. We go back to the mask here. We have these holes right here. Let's fill that in real quick. So now that we know how it's looking, let's go ahead and fill that in. And let's fill this in. And this. Essentially, I don't want these holes because they're going to create weird artifacts as we start eroding and changing our landscape. So we just want these offshoots coming out, and then this big old mountain, I guess. There we go. So now it's not going to look as weird. Alright, so let's add a shaper node to this as well, to this purlin. And let's see what effect we can get from this. Not shaper node, but just like the shaper option. No, we need clamp. Sorry. So if we were to change it this way, it would be more bulbous, more canyon-like. This way would make it look more peaky. It'll bring in those smaller details a bit more, but maybe not that low. Maybe about right here. Now we have those details. We need some details to work with, otherwise it just won't look good. Alright, so we don't even have to add the combine here yet. We can still add anything we want to this purlin. So let's add something that will change it around to make it look a little bit nicer. Just drop this noise right here, and let's put the mask in. Now we have some noise in there. It's very small amount of noise, which is fine because we need to have some detail in there. And then let's see. Could add some rocks, I guess. And the rocks would be kind of like more noise, but we can do larger rocks and have them appear only in certain areas. Again, like on the mask. There we go. So that kind of, you have this small noise and then you have this larger noise. And then again, let's use one of the newer nodes if I can remember where it's at. It's going to be an erosion. It's going to be is it stacks? Yeah, there we go. Add that. Mask it out. Right there. Or maybe not. Didn't quite like that, apparently. There we go, but I do like that. So stacks, for those who don't really know, stacks is like taking an erosion and stacking erosion on top of each other over and over and over again, which helps you retain these details on the edges, on the steeper areas, which is nice, and that's what we want to see. And before stacks, you had to do that yourself by using like terraces and erosion and terrace and erosion, and that's what you would get. But with stacks, that's no longer the case. You just kind of add stacks and on it goes. We're also going to add thermal. I think thermal will be a good one to use in this case. And we're going to change this to that. And let's go here. Now you can see we've added in our lower areas, lower hilly areas, and now we have more of a canyon-esque style up here, but now our erosion is all wonky and we have these weird goofy areas. I think what we're going to want to do is kind of, dang it, change this around a bit more. Okay, so let's look through these again one more time. Add is still alright. Screen is good too, but we don't want subtract. We don't want divide. We don't want max. We definitely don't want minimum. Square root kind of boosts everything up, which could look nice if you're making more of an in-valley look or an in-canyon look, but that's not what we want. No. That's pretty much all of it. So let's go back to add, and let's just decrease the amount we're adding in. Actually, let's use screen. That way it doesn't take in all the information, and then we can just kind of play around with the ratio. That might be better. So let's do a 60%, which I think looks relatively nice. Now it doesn't look as funky over here. Alrighty, so what we started with was this, which doesn't look too bad for just playing around. And then this is what we're kind of ending with, is this. We've added some detail to the top area that was flat, which is what we kind of want. We don't want flat, detailless areas. They're just not as interesting. So we've added some more interesting details in. So now the next thing that we got to do is we're just going to go ahead and start adding color to our landscape. This is probably my favorite part. I can spend all day doing this, just playing around with different options. But for the time being, we're just going to stick with some of the more tried and true methods that I found. We're going to add 2 texture nodes, and we're going to connect it to the combine. And also, texture does take a little bit longer to build out, so keep that in mind. What we're going to want to do first is, I don't need that 2D view anymore. Proxima. What's the standard workflow for other DCC applications like Maya? Do you export the mesh from Gaea or just the maps? You can do whatever you want, really. As far as I'm aware, I don't really use Maya often, but as far as I'm aware, you can export the 3D objects from Gaea, or you can export the maps. So if you want to use the height map, you can. I recommend using the 3D objects, however. There's some limitations to the height maps. There's been some issues going back and forth between programs where the height data isn't exactly the same in Gaea or in other applications as it is in Gaea. That's being worked on and being fixed. And I believe they made quite a few changes to that process already that kind of resolved some of the higher 32-bit data. But if you're going to Maya, I recommend probably using a 3D object and then using Maya to kind of paint in your details or whatever it is that you're doing. So it just depends on your preference, really. I mean, Maya's just like, as far as I'm aware from what I have used of Maya, which wasn't much, but long time ago, like maybe 12 years ago was the last time I used it. And I used it like any other 3D object or 3D application where I could just import an object or I can use a height map. So, I mean, that's all down to your preference. All right, we're going to add another texture here. I really hate allergy season. Okay, so we got our 2 textures. We're going to separate them because I don't want them to be next to each other. That's where I get confused. We're going to change this around. So we're going to keep this one as mode A, and we're going to change this to mode B. We're also going to change the seed. But I'm not going to change anything else. What's confusing is that there is the build tab and then there is the export tab from the file menu. Pretty new to Gaea, so just confused. Where are the pros of Gaea in comparison to World Machine? Those are 2. Well, the first one, let's go ahead and Proxima. We're going to get to that. So the build tab is just what you're going to be building. The export is what you have to build everything in Gaea. So everything that you have in your node graph here has to be built. What you want to do is select the individual nodes that you want to export, and those are usually going to be your color nodes, your selection nodes, and your height nodes. So if you were to go here and say, hey, I want to export this erosion, sure, you can do that. You can right click and you can pin for mark for export, and that will export this erosion node out, which includes a height map as well as all the wear, deposit, and flow map data. But in some cases, you don't want to. You just want to have the effect of the erosion, so you don't mark it for export. And then instead, you take something like this combiner, which is our final landscape, and you mark that for export. But if you need those masks from the erosion, you can mark that for export, and then you can discard the height map. You don't have to keep it, but you can keep the wear, deposit, and flow data. When it comes to the mesh export, you have to use the mesher node, and you have to connect that to your final landscape node, which would be our combiner. And the limitation here, though, is that if you want to export the height map of your final landscape, you have to disconnect the mesher node or else you'll get an error message similar to this. So if we were to mark that for export, go to Mesher, and then just kind of keep all this how it is. We'll just kind of set stuff up here, and then try to build this out. Let's see. Well, it'll take a long time to build everything else out, so we'll get back to that in a minute, but you have to have your landscape not marked for export to export as a mesher. But again, we'll get around to that. So I guess in short, to kind of answer your question, the build tab and the export tab are two separate things. The build tab has to have everything in there that you're using to make your landscape. The export tab is what you select individually to export out of Gaea. Hopefully that is not as confusing or confused you more. All right, so what are the pros and cons, or the pros of Gaea in comparison to World Machine? So I used World Machine for a good portion of my 3D career. I used it quite a bit. A matter of fact, I used it exclusively for about 10 years, maybe 12, 13 years. And it's really nice. There are a lot of pros to World Machine, as in it's a older product. It's more aged. It has a lot more work that's been done on it, so there aren't as many bugs. There's quite a few different features that are available in World Machine that are not available in Gaea. However, it's built on a very old, archaic code, so it's not necessarily the fastest of all programs out there. And the newer versions of World Machine are nice. They've changed things around. Stefan is the guy that actively builds for it. He's the owner, I believe he's the owner of it. And he's changed stuff around quite a bit in the newer versions, but unfortunately the model that they have is that you buy it and then you get your updates for about a year or so, and then after that you have to buy the next version. That's fine. That's a pretty typical standard model. However, the problem with that is when I got World Machine, it was during a hiatus when there was no active work being done on it, and so I went about 3, maybe almost 4 years without any updates to World Machine. And then by the time that one came out, my 1-year update option had expired, which he was nice enough to give to people an option to get the newest updates, especially if they bought it during a certain time period. But I was like a month off of that time period, so I didn't get the new updates, unfortunately. And I didn't have the money at the time to buy the newer ones, so I don't have hardly any experience with the newer versions of World Machine. But with that being said, I still have World Machine, and I would still use it from time to time, depending on whether or not the person or the company that I'm contracting for requires it. But most of the time I'm sticking with Gaea because I find Gaea to be a lot more user-friendly, a lot more artistic-friendly, or artist-friendly. And all the nodes have a place and make sense. The macro nodes in World Machine are awesome and powerful, but they can be confusing, especially if you're not like a developer or a mathematician. So Gaea is a lot more artist-friendly in my opinion. But again, it comes down, it's really hard to weigh the major pros in Gaea to World Machine because they're both similar programs but completely different at the same time. I can't really say. Gaea, I think, is just overall a nice, fresh, clean start to 3D landscape building, and it's fast. Those would probably be the two major cons, or not cons, but pros that I have for Gaea, is that one, it's fast, and it's fresh. It's new. It's really easy to work with compared to World Machine. Any exporting tutorial on YouTube? That's what I asked. Okay, cool. I have exporting tutorials on my channel, Proxima. If you wanted to go through and watch my Gaea tutorials, you can. I go through the whole exporting process for landscape, including color maps. So you can go back and watch those. I can't remember what the actual name of the video is. I name them and then I forget them. So, but we're going to go through that process in this video, actually. So if you stick around a little bit longer, you'll be able to get into the habit of what's being built and what's being exported. All right, Martin, welcome back. I hope your dinner was awesome. Only getting into Gaea, so I didn't understand why I couldn't export my mesher and maps simultaneously. Yeah, that's why. At least that's what I've ran into, and it might be a bug. I'm not entirely sure, but it's not really a big inconvenience, so not a big deal for me. Is there anything relatively similar to World Machine's layout generator? I'm very new to Gaea, so I don't know how to... no, so right now in Gaea there isn't something like World Machine's layout generator, and that is something that I miss, is the layout generator. It was awesome, because you can do a lot of stuff in the layout generator. You can use it for masking and selecting and stuff like that, or you can build out really large, awesome landscapes with different features in different areas. You can still do that in Gaea, and we actually just did that using the mask node right here, as well as the draw node. So I didn't keep the draw node on here, but if you use the mask node, it's almost the exact same of what I would use the layout generator for. But in Gaea, your workspace is essentially this. And there is a reason for that, and Dax has the reason. I can't remember exactly what it is. But if you are part of the Facebook channel page or Facebook page, you can ask in there. I had asked in the past. I just can't remember the response. I apologize. It's been a very long, rough last couple years, so a lot of information that I've taken in, I haven't dedicated to memory. So, but there is a reason for that, and it's actually a difference between World Machine and Gaea, but I have learned to live without the layout generator because I can still do pretty much everything I was doing in World Machine in Gaea, despite not having it. Alright, so let's go ahead and hopefully that answered everybody's questions. Feel free to ask more if you would like. Let's go ahead and add a sat map here and a sat map here. Now a good idea with sat maps is to kind of mix and match. So yeah, you can add as many sat maps as you want. I mean, the sky's the limit. It just depends on how long you want to wait for your builds to build out. So if you want something that's deserty, you want to be able to combine maps that are orange, browns, tans, maybe some darker ones like this in some areas, but you don't want it to be all just this one color. This is just, I mean, for a good baseline, you can keep the darker colors for the rocks, but we want to add more color, which is why we add multiple sat maps, so like this one. And these are just the two that came standard as I put them in. This is what they defaulted to, and they'll default to something different every time you put them in. So what you do is you just take out a couple selections on your landscape, put together your sat maps, and then kind of combine them together to get different looks. And a good way to do that is to first use a texture node, which gives you these awesome textures. But we have, in Gaea, we have a mixer node, and there's a difference between combiner and mixer. Combiner will work with your height data, so like your blacks, whites, and grays. Mixer is going to work with your RGB values, so your red, greens, and blues. And this is what you use when you're combining different color maps together. And you have all the same options in the mixer. So if we go back to our properties here, we have all the same options. Nothing changes except the way the values are interpreted. And another way to mask in information from your height or from your color data, so say you want more of this coming through than this, but you want to keep this as well, you take your mask and you attach that to your texture, and that way we get more of that info coming in. And then let's go ahead and set the blend all the way, and you don't even have to change much in these mixer nodes. You can keep it at blend ratio 100%, especially if you're using a mask. So now we have this being mixed with this, and this is what we get. However, this is kind of not what we want, so not what I want anyways, and you can use whatever you want, but this is not what I want. So I want the rocks, I don't even know what I want for the rocks and the color, so let's think about this for a second. I probably want the rocks to be more black rather than this brown, especially on the edges here. So we can take the mask and we can combine that there, and now we get that color data coming in. Or we can just completely change the texture here. So let's find something useful or interesting, one of the two. Just find so these three right here actually mix really well together. I've used these quite a bit, 284, 85, and 286. They mix together pretty well, and I actually like using them quite a bit. But I think until I figure out exactly what I want to do, what'd I miss? It's more This one right here, more process friendly if we export the mesh as a low poly count, such as 500K, and export a displacement and normal map. So yeah, that's also dependent on what you need. So it'll obviously be more processor friendly if you export a lower mesh, but it's still going to take a long time to build out a higher resolution displacement map. So yeah, it's still kind of give and take here. So if you output a lower mesh, a low poly mesh, and export out like maybe a 2K map, that will probably work, or even a higher K, maybe a 4K or 16K, 8K or 16K, depending on your license. But it would be more processor friendly to export lower poly meshes and height maps, and then just kind of combine the two to get the details you need. But again, that's really going to be dependent on your processor, the application you're using, all that. But that's not unheard of. I don't necessarily do that. I usually just export a height map. I hardly ever use the mesher. But in this case, I'm probably going to be exporting a height map, and then I'll be exporting a normal map, and I'm just going to stick with that. And that will take, I want to say at maybe 4K, which is what I plan on exporting this at. With all these nodes that I have not a whole lot. I mean, this isn't a very large node graph, but this will probably take maybe 10, 15 minutes to build out, depending on, I have a whole bunch of erosion nodes in here, so those can take a long time. Hopefully that answered your question. It might have been more verbal word salad than anything. What did you use the mask node for in this particular project? What I used the mask node for is we had this original landscape, which this detail over here I was fine with, but up here it was very barren. So I made a mask, selected out this area up there, threw in a purlin, and then masked in some noise, and then rocks to kind of break up that noise a bit more while retaining the smaller details. Threw on a stacks, which eroded the landscape up there. Then a thermal to kind of bring in this sediment deposits down here. I actually missed one thing in the thermals. Let's go ahead and throw in a larger debris size as well. It doesn't have to be large, but just a small amount, just so we have. So if you were to go back and look at it before, this was all flat and just very boring. The debris size in the thermal erosion node actually throws in noise in your sedimentation, so it looks like rocks broke off. That's what I wanted to do. Totally forgot about that. And then we combined it with this to fill in that barren landscape up above. So that's what we use the mask node for. Just made selecting that area a little bit easier rather than using select heights and slopes and all that. We just kind of drew in our mask and got what we needed. All right. So we got the mixer here. It's going to take a minute to build out. And then, and I'm also looking at this at 1K. It'll default to 0.5, which is just 512 by 512. 1K will be 1024 by 1024. I usually work in 1K because it's a good mixture between low res and high res, and then you can see how your landscape's going to be built out at a high resolution. Because as stated before in this live streaming, some of these nodes are resolution dependent, and the higher resolution they are, the either finer details you'll get or could actually make or break some of your erosion nodes. When I say make, as in you'll get some more details in your in your erosion that you didn't see before, but it could also break it because it might be too much, and then you have to go through and change your erosion around so you don't get as much erosion data coming through and making it look terrible. I'm going to also change the lighting around here. Let's see. There we go. All right. So that's what we have so far. But again, it's we're going to not use this one for the time being. We want to figure out what we want here first. So if we were going to use this sat map and this texture node to texturize our landscape, what do we want to have selected using this sat map? Do we want it to be our rocks, or do we want it to be grass? What do we want it to be? In this case, I want it to be, I want to work from the ground up, So I'm going to have this be our dirt and rock, is what this is going to be. So let's find a really good dirt and rock look. And this is nice. Bit too brown though. Want more grays, maybe? Like this. This looks good. So we have dirt, maybe even some grassy, leafy areas, and some rock. Now this one, I want to be more grassy, and this is actually a pretty good standard one, but let's look and see what we have. But we got some questions here. I'm not entirely sure why the shadows did. I don't know why they disappeared, but we can add a light node, and we can bring those shadows back. But for the time being, I don't really mind the shadows being gone. I guess we could change the elevation to see if we can bring in some more shadows. Or maybe not. Might be a limitation right now in the bleeding edge version, which is what I'm using. But I'm not entirely sure why they disappeared. If we need to, we can throw in a light node. So we put our mixer, actually in this case, if we wanted to see what it looked like first, we would throw it into there and then throw our height into there. And luckily, the light node doesn't really take a whole lot of time to build out. When it was first introduced, it did. It took a really long time, but now it actually doesn't. It's really relatively quick. And that light node changed the way that satmap looked quite a bit, because this is more flat shading. This is not flat shading, so now we can see what's happening. Alright, so we have our rock. Now we got to find something good for grass. We're going to do a couple things for grass. So first we're going to find our base, and we can change this to green. No. There's just so many options. I can spend all day just looking through these. Maybe not. This one's like a grass and rock. Yeah, that one is really nice. That actually puts the rock in the area where I want it. And the grass where I want it. So that's actually a good all-in-one right there. I actually might keep that and just flip these around. I like to keep them all in order so I don't get lost. So let's do that. Alright, so that's what we have right now. That's nice. That's nice. Alright. So for a rock, we still kind of want to keep that. So let's combine the two and see what we get real fast. Mix them together. So we're going to put that one there, and we're going to put this one there. And we're going to mask in, I believe we're going to mask that in. Yeah, there we go. So we got our grass and our rock. So that doesn't look half bad, but we still have more that we can do. So if we want to look at it now, let's just take our, oops, it's bugging out. Don't be that way. There we go. There we go. Alright, so we got our rock, we got our dirt, and we got our grass. We got some lighter grass too, so that's nice. Alright, but having just these two textures is not good enough, not in my opinion. So, next thing is my next favorite is Protrusion. And Protrusion is going to select the protruding areas on the landscape. And there's not a whole lot, actually, in this landscape, because it's all mostly rounded and flat, but it will select these areas. And we can make these areas really rocky looking. So, let's take this Protrusion, let's set up another sat map, and let's set up another mixer. And also, I want to show you guys something real quick to kind of help separate all of this from your landscape. And no, I do not have an ArtStation account. It's something that I've been contemplating on setting up, but I don't. Partly because isn't ArtStation something that you have to pay for to utilize. Like you have to pay like a membership fee or something like that. I'm not against that, but that's one of the first things that usually turns me off is artists are already poor. So at least the artists that I know are already poor, and so they don't have a whole lot of money. So spending money on a membership account on something is a hard justification for me. Let's see. How do I dictate the scale of the scene? Like, for example, so you need a 4K by 4K area with mountains, or is it solely noise frequency wise? There is a scale that you can change in Gaea for your actual world. It's actually in your tab here for your light. It'll be, actually no, I think they changed it. It's going to be, where is it at? No, I didn't want that. It's somewhere around here. Where did they put it? It's been changed in this version. I've lost it. Save it. Oh, I should probably save this real quick while I'm looking around. Let's save it as that. Oh, you can post stuff for free on it. Oh, I didn't know that. See, I know very little about ArtStation, so that's actually nice. I might look into that because it's something that I have contemplated. I know it's in here somewhere. There's a place to change like the world settings, like the scale, and now I've lost it. It used to be on the top here. Now it's not. Maybe somebody can fill me in real quick. But yeah, there is a place to change it, and you can change it from, I believe the default is 5K. Geez, I wish I knew where it was at. It's moved though. Zoom to extends. I'm gonna spend so much time looking for this that I'm gonna lose it. That's the 3D version, 3D thing. But yeah, I'll look around for it. It's in here somewhere. I'm using a newer version of Gaea that has a lot of different changes in it from the more public version, so it's been moved, and I actually don't change it often, so I'll find it and I'll fill you in on it when I find it. Okay, so without further ado, let's continue. So we got our protrusion, we got our sat map, and I'm not making any changes to this protrusion, and the only change there is the power anyways. So we're just gonna stick with the default real fast, and then for the mixer here, we're just gonna keep blend ratio 100, and we're gonna put this protrusion sat map in there, and we're gonna change the way this sat map looks. But before we do that, we want to change the mixer. So we're gonna take the mask, plug it into the protrusion. So now, if we look real quick, you can see the slight differences that we have. It selects those protruding areas on the landscape, and we can make them look more rocky. And to do that, we can just find a more rocky looking option. We can see the differences here if we were to use this. So, and then you can see what's happening here. But we don't want orange. That just looks weird. Maybe this. I want something that has slight variation. Maybe this. Oh, come on. Why did you do that? So what we had before and what we have now just makes those rocks a little bit more dark. Man, now it's bothering me. I got to go find those changes, that scale setting now. Dang it, it's bothering me. All right, well, I'm just gonna try to focus on other things here. Okay, so we have our grass, our rock, our dirt. It's looking quite decent. There's still a lot more we can do. So let's throw in another data option. And what I like to use is velocity. And you can think of this as like rainfall. So we're going to actually just remove this light node real quick. We'll come back to that a little later. And This is a personal project. It was actually just something that I decided to put together for this video. It's this whole landscape here is specifically just to show you guys a different workflow in Gaea, like my typical workflow, and sharing it with you. So this has nothing to do with anybody else. I woke up, thought of something that I could do for you guys, and this is what we're doing. So nothing going on here other than just wanting to share information with you guys. So yeah, velocity will be rainfall. You can think of it as like rainfall, and it kind of makes those dark streaks that you find on rocks in areas where there's a lot of water runoff or a lot of I'm like doing stuff with my hands, but you guys can't see it. Water runoff, rainfall, just like darker spots on your rock. This is what you would use to get that. It's the velocity data map. You have a whole bunch of options here, and you can increase the rain amount, and we'll just go ahead and apply that. And be aware though, velocity does take a long time to build. And I was going to show you guys one more thing. Actually, it was the portals. The portals are really nice, especially when you start doing stuff like this. So before we do anything else, we're going to make a portal. Did not want to do that on my protrusion. There was a portal node at one point. Those still are no. Portals have changed in this on this version too. So we're gonna let's see. Interject portal. We want to do the output for the portal. And now you'll see, now that we have the portal set up, everything that was connected to the portal is now disconnected, but we still retain all of our info. So you can keep your landscape separate from your coloring. Now you don't have to worry about it. That makes it nice for keeping your graphs nice and clean, which I am a huge fan of. I usually just do this where I just line it up below the last output, because what you're going to have to do now though is you're going to have to we're going to be adding more nodes, and we don't want it to be out of the way. So that just makes it so you can keep your graph really nice and clean. And I'm just put it there for the time being, just for showing you guys. Let's move it maybe about right there. And so we have our velocity here. We'll add a sat map. Those portals are nice, by the way. It's a really good idea. So essentially, to make the portal, just click on your last node that you want to make a portal on, interject portal, choose the option you want. So in this case, I want the portal to be on the output. And you can do it on the separators too, or the separation, but the output is what we want. And so we made a portal for the output, which pretty much draws invisible links between everything and just makes it look nice and clean. So back to velocity, we increased the rain amount, which gives us a whole bunch of like these swooping areas on our rocks. We don't need all that much. That was mostly just for showing you guys. This actually makes it really nice when you want to make like waterfalls as well. If you want to color in waterfall so you know where your waterfall is on your landscape when you export it, you can use a velocity to do that. And you would just do that by putting in like one of these blue nodes or blue sat maps, and you'll see stuff kind of turn blue. There you go. So like right here, it'd be like a river down into a waterfall, stuff like that. It's essentially what we're doing. But I'm just gonna kind of keep the rain amount low, and we're gonna use green, but a good green. Let's find a good green. I mean, all these are good in some way. I'm just very picky. Should have brought some water. I gotta sneeze. Excuse me. Oh, that one's ugly. One of these has got to look pretty decent. That one might be good. Let's just let's try that one out for the time being. Make another mixer. Let's connect that in. We'll line up all these mixers. And there we go. All right. So that might be a little better. So still retained our grass and our dirt and our rock, but we kind of masked in a little more of the grassy, hilly areas, and we still have our rock because of the protrusion. If we wanted to, we can actually add in another protrusion map. So that looks, in my opinion, that looks a lot better than this one. This one still looks fine. It looks barren. This is like something that you would see in like central or southern Utah during spring. This is probably what you would see during early summer in northern Utah. You just have grassy, hilly areas with like these rocks that kind of jut out. Like that's what it reminds me of. But we don't have to stop there. We have all the data in the world to play with. So let's throw in another protrusion, and we're going to connect it to there. That creates the portal for us. And let's do the sat map. We want to bring in a little more of the rock, just a tad bit, not a whole lot. So let's find one that was similar to our original protrusion. So that was what, number 93? We can use the same one, or we can use one that's similar. So like this one is kind of, maybe not. Maybe we can use one that is completely different. Let's live a little. It gives you more of like a highland look. So we have like the darker rock. Now we have like a very light rock. And it's just putting in the same masks. If we wanted to, we can increase this. Let's double it and apply that. So that'll make our selections a little bit harder, a little bit stronger. And that way we still bring in, or what we could do is we can make this one stronger. So let's make this one stronger by half. Increase it by half. And then we'll decrease this one by half. That way the selections are kind of on top of each other a little bit. And not by much. Where we get a mixture of the darker rocks that we had, as well as now the new light rock. But don't know if I like that light looking area. Let's throw in something a little bit more darker again. Yeah, kind of like that. I think that looks a little better. And there we go. And then I like this over here. This is really nice. This little bar area. Like I said, the foothills right here. Looks pretty decent. All right, so I think right there you could probably call it good. If you wanted to continue, of course you could. So we could throw in something like curvature, which is nice. It selects really small minor details. And if you are familiar with select convexity in World Machine, this is kind of similar. Now we can use this to bring in even smaller details, smaller rock details that we want in our sat map. If I can get this to work with me. There we go. And you know, just to kind of show off what it's doing, let's use a really wonky one. And there we go. Now we're selecting more of these inner areas of our landscape. The rocks had kind of fallen and laid to rest. But that orange is way too much. So we're gonna mix in something else. Ooh, wonder what that would look like. Yeah, that's not bad. I like that. So now we went from kind of this to this, which kind of dulled out or muted the colors a bit more, but it brought in like the more rocky areas again. And in nature, like an old teacher once said, in nature, very few things are actually extremely vibrant, especially if left to their own devices. So we do have a lot of like these drier areas and areas that are probably been hit with more water or living a little bit longer. And what I find really interesting is the sandbar right here. Got like this sand pit thing going on right here, which is awesome. So let's say this is good. Let's increase the resolution to 2K. I want to see what it looks like at 2K, and I'm just gonna move this around if it'll let me. It won't. While this is going through, it might take some time. There is a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of heavy selections. I'm gonna go get some water. I'll be right back. Alright. How about a water and a beer? They both wet the whistle. How many of you guys are sticking around for this long? Sauce Boss TM. I do like using the textures I make in Gaea. If I didn't like using them, I wouldn't go through the trouble of making them. I know that I don't want that to come across as me being snarky, but I do like the textures I make in Gaea. I think they look a lot more natural than what I can get in Vue, and I used Vue for years, and I still like the program, and I think you can get awesome textures inside of Vue, especially when you put the work and effort into doing it. But I like having the texture I make in Gaea as like a big mega texture where I already have all the areas I want colored for what they're supposed to be. So like rock is rock, grass is grass, and then just adding in the details I need separately in Vue, or in this case I'll be doing it in Cinema 4D with just a generalized noise applied to the overall texture. And then throwing in a normal map, which I forgot to add, but I will be adding that after this is done being built, just to kind of help direct where some of the light should be in the texture. So I like using the texture that I make in Gaea, and in the past I actually mixed the texture I made in World Machine at the time, when I was using Vue and World Machine mostly. I would mix in the base texture as the map that I made in World Machine, and then added on top of it with layers with the procedural textures that Vue had or that I made. Export normal and displacement. Yep, I will be exporting a normal and displacement. I forgot to add the normal map, but we'll be adding that and exporting the displacement and the normal. When it comes to the normal map in Gaea though, don't expect it to be like some big game-changing normal map. It's there to kind of help in what I find when I was using Thea Render. as well as Octane, but mostly Thea, is the landscape was just kind of flat. The lighting was flat on the landscape, wasn't in areas where it's supposed to be appropriately. So the normal map that you export from Gaea is mostly going to be used in that way. It's not going to be like you have like a color map that has no detail, and then all of a sudden you have a normal map that now has a bunch of detail that's going to make things pop. It's not necessarily going to do that. And what I like doing in World Machine, which I can't do in Gaea right now, at least not that I'm aware of, is I liked adding a select convexity map to the normal map. So what that did is it selected the smaller convex areas of the landscape, and I added that to the normal map, and that made the normal map stand out a bit more on the export. And when I was using it in like View or Octane, usually it was Octane in Cinema 4D, and that would help kind of make the normal map a little bit more poppy and, you know, look better. But you're not going to necessarily get that in Gaea, at least not that I'm aware of. I actually haven't tried it since I first started using Gaea, so maybe that's changed. But as far as I can remember, you couldn't really mix those together. Okay, so that's what we have. Looks pretty good. Okay, so we have like the hilly areas I was talking about before. We do have some nice terracing going on, and our resolution change didn't really change much in the sandbars or the erosion, so that's good. This is really noisy, and that's probably because of the noise that we added to it, but it's not too bad. It's not going to make much of a difference if I were to go back and change that, so I'll just keep that the way it is. And this is like a very early spring central Utah look, I think. Biggest map I've done in terms of size, not resolution. I had made the entire state of Utah in real size. That's the largest I've done so far. And I did it as a project for a company that wanted to simulate that really old video game back in like the 80s or 90s or something like that, where you just... Desert Bus is what it was called. And it was a game where all you did was made sure a bus would not drive off the side of the road from like somewhere in California to like Las Vegas or something like that. So it took hours to do because it was in real time. But a company wanted to do that, and they wanted to simulate that, but for new like graphics and whatnot. So I made the entire state of Utah, and we just drove all the way from northern Utah down to southern Utah in real time in a car. And it was large, and I made the map, I made the details and the assets. They put it all together, and it was really funny to see. They didn't release it for anything. It was a project that they were doing for like a class or something like that. But they weren't artists. They needed somebody to make the map for them. They didn't know how, so I made it for them, and it was really funny. That your Octane crashed a lot. In that case, do you use Redshift? And if you do, how is your experience with it with the terrains? I have used Redshift. I was actually a alpha tester for Redshift before it even became beta. And I had a license to it for a really long time, and then all the people who were really early adopters of it lost that license after they changed some modelings around, which was fine. It was understandable, and we all knew it was going to happen. But it didn't work for me the way I wanted Octane to work, which is why I stuck with Octane. And since making that video, Octane, I've actually resolved a lot of the problems with it crashing. It was actually mostly to do with my GPU. I have two GPUs. I have two Titan Zs, and one of them, if I had selected all four, so a Titan Z is a 2 GPU card, so it has 2 GPUs on it, or in it. So if you have 2 of them, you have 4 total GPUs. And if I had selected all 4 to be used, it would crash constantly. If I deselect one of them, doesn't matter which one, but just one of them, it works just fine. So I haven't had a whole lot of crashes in Octane since doing that. There are still times where it does, but it's mostly because I'm overburdening my graphics card and my RAM, where I have to take a lot of the textures and assets, 3D models and stuff into the out-of-core memory. So it gets really slow and then it crashes, and that's mostly my fault, not Octane's fault. You use Gaea for building Utah. I used not Gaea for building Utah. I used World Machine for building Utah. I haven't actually tried doing it in Gaea. But there is a way you can do that. So if you download the data, the height data for Utah, you would just use the file node right here and import that, doing whatever it is that you want to do, whatever file it is, and then you can use that to import height, real world height data. Just use the file node. Makes it super easy. All right, I'm going to line these back up. About right there. Okay, so this built out at 2K, and it looks pretty decent. Not perfect, but that's what happens when we're just mostly experimenting. If I were to take the time to go back and change some of this stuff, I would, but I'm not going to really worry about it right now. So at this point, we want to add our normal map. Before I forget, I always forget the normal map, and I don't know why, but it's just always like the last thing I add, and I just always forget it. And so there's our normal. And you have a couple options here. So you have the 4-point, which was the old method for our normal map. This is what shipped with Gaea. Since then, it's been updated to the 8-point, which by all stretch of the imagination, you should be using instead of 4-point anyways. You can also still change the weight, and you can flip the X and the Y, but I usually just keep it at 50%. I keep it with the defaults, but if you want to, you can increase the weight a bit more and have things kind of pop a little bit, but obviously that's too much. So 50, we could probably go up to 55 just to add in more values, I guess. Maybe 60. Also, for those who have a hard time making minor increments, just use Shift and hover over any of these options, and you'll get this bar. This arrow right here will be increased by 1, and then it's the exact opposite for the other direction. This will decrease it by everything else. So decrease by 1, increase by 10, and then you can maximize it. This one sets it back to the default, and then this way it just decreases it in the same extents. These will double the values. These arrows will have it or double it. So that makes things really nice when you have to make minor changes. Tips on LOD. So you can export level of detail meshes in Gaea. It'll always be half. Every LOD will be half of what the max is. So if you were exporting out 8K, next one will be 4K, the next one after that will be 2, then 1, so on and so forth. And the mesher node actually breaks it down for you. So if we were to use the mesher, let's see here. Let's connect that. So I also recommend using quads for your landscape. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on what your project is and what you need to do, but I recommend using force quads. You can choose whatever you want here. You can use OBJ or FBX. You can use a point cloud as well. I don't think there's going to be a lot of options for myself personally to use that, but I can see myself using FBX or OBJ. I usually just use OBJ. And then you have your scale. This is going to be dependent on what you need. You can keep it normalized, which is default. So this will be like what you see here is what you'll get. Or you can have 1 unit equals 1 meter or 1 unit equals 1 kilometer. That's just to help you when you import it into another program. It's just going to make it a little bit easier for you to understand the scale in your program. Everything in Cinema 4D is always so small. So I just keep it normalized, and it works out in my favor most of the time, and I don't have to really worry about it. You can create walls, which I don't recommend. That'll make little walls pop up on the edges, if I remember correctly, or along the edge. which is a major problem if you're exporting a height map, which I will actually show you how to resolve in Cinema 4D using Octane at least, that you can get rid of those artifacts when you export your height map. And the reason why that is because it's trying to repeat the noise, and so you'll get like this 1 pixel width artifact around the edges, and it's super annoying. But then you have your LODs here, and you can choose how many you want. You have a total of 4 you can choose. So from here we have our vertex count set to 1024. That'll give you a breakdown of what your LODs will look like as they are exported. So your LOD 4 will be 64 by 64. If you were to increase this to 2048, which is what I recommend doing, is keeping with the regular squared options. It just breaks it down going forward, and then obviously 81, 92, and that breaks it down by half steps, or half steps going down. So while using LODs, I don't use them often. I hardly ever use them, and that's part of the reason why I have problems with getting my scenes to be the right size and being able to keep everything in memory, is because I actually don't use level of details, and I really should, but I don't. Cinema 4D actually has a lot of automated options for level of detail now, especially the newer version, where it can actually change level of details on the fly, and you need to have these for it to work depending on how far away the camera is from your object. So if I had my camera set up like around the edge right here, and I wanted like from here to here to be full detail, but everything after that be different levels of detail, I can do that in Cinema 4D, but I need to have these. And I mean, it just depends on what program you're using. Cinema 4D makes it really easy, but I don't plan on using that in this video. If I ever do anything in the future, I can give you a few more tips, but for now, that's just kind of how it's broken down when you do your LODs. Hopefully that was helpful and answered your question. If not, let me know, and I'll try my best. Okay, we got our normal map. So now we need to go through and select everything we want to export. So this is where the build and export comes through. So the normal map we want to mark for export. The combine we want to mark for export. This will be a height map that we're exporting. I don't want the meshes, at least not this time. We also want our last mixer right here. This will be our final color data. We want to mark that for export. And then if I wanted to, I can go through and select these individual protrusions, which will be nice to use if I wanted to put a rocky material on our protruding rock surfaces. It's nice to mark those for export and use those as masks inside of Cinema 4D. I'm not going to this time around. I have a video on my channel where I go over that and how to do that, but I'm not going to do it for this one. And then if we wanted to as well, we can export our erosion data by just marking our erosion node for export. But again, I'm not going to worry about that. I think the only ones that we're going to really need is our combine, our color, and our normal, at least in this case. All right, and then if you double click on a node, you can rename a node. Should be able to. Might change in this new version. Parent. There was, oh yeah, right there. Usually you can double click it, but it didn't work. This will be my final height. I always capitalize the first 2 letters. I don't know why. So now I know that that is my final height. And this is just all for keeping things organized. I can name this one. Nope, still doesn't let me. Okay. Final color. And we'll call that good. So now we know that those are the ones we need. That's just to help keep you very organized. What about water, rivers, etc.? Is this map dry? This map is dry. I'm not going to put in any rivers. I hadn't planned on putting in any rivers, but that would be a nice one to go in about doing. So like lakes, oceans, rivers, streams even. I might actually put together another live stream where we do that. because that's a good idea. So yeah, this map will be dry. Obviously, it's not completely dry because we have this grass coloration and whatnot. But yeah, no water in this one. Sorry. And other than that, everything will be built. So we have to choose what we want here. We can ignore that. Should be working. I think I want to use PNG 16 for my height map, but everything else I want to be 8-bit. So there we have our final height. That'll be 16-bit. Our final color can be PNG 8, and our normal map can be PNG 8. There we go. We don't need 16-bit for the height or for the color in the normal map. I had asked what the schedule ought to be for people who often view my channel. I asked for if people are more interested to have them in the morning, afternoon, evening, or later at night. The majority of people said it doesn't matter, or another option was it doesn't matter when, so the majority of people said it doesn't matter when. But I want to try to do it at least every Saturday or Sunday. Depends on the day, because I actually work a lot. So if I don't work on Saturday, then I'll try to do it on Saturday. If I do work on Saturday, I'll do it on Sunday. So yesterday I worked, so I'm doing it today. But I'll try to do it on the 2 weekend days, because that's when most people are available. But it'll be between Saturday or Sunday. So today's Sunday because I worked yesterday. And I'll try to do it sometime in the afternoon or evening, so around the time that I started this one would be better, because that's around the time that people were getting off of work who do work on the weekends. But it was also late enough that it gave them time to get home. So I'm going to try to keep it between 5, 6 o'clock. I know it's 6 o'clock right now where I'm at. And I started it around a little bit before 5, I think. So that will be the schedule. Saturday or Sunday, and around the time people get off, around 5 o'clock. If I had to add a high snowy mountain to this terrain, how would I approach it without affecting the general terrain or the generated terrain? It's like a hero mountain peak. Good question. So we actually were going to do that before, but I just didn't like the way any of it was turning out, partly because I'm terrible at drawing masks. But I would use the mask node here, where we selected our mask. And I would just make, another general selection, fill it in, and then use the mountain node. And the mountain node actually is a very awesome node for using for hero mountains. That's what I recommend using it for. I know a lot of people like to use them for generating entire terrains, which is, in my opinion, not its intended purpose. The mountain node is specifically used for generating hero mountains with lots of detail. I just didn't play with the settings in the mountain node a lot when we were first trying it, and I didn't play with the mask. And I'm positive, not just because I'm taking a guess, but because in the past I've had to do it before, is we can use the mask node, draw a good mask, not the cheap haphazard one that I did, and then actually play with the mountain node to get the detail we need. And we can add more of these other options afterwards, like the noise and the rocks and whatnot, to the mountain afterwards to give it more detail. That's how we did it here in this area, is exactly how I would have added another mountain to this landscape without impacting the overall generated landscape. It would have worked. I just didn't put the time and effort into doing it. That's the only problem. But good question, because a lot of people, at least when they're first starting out in 3D landscaping, or terrain creation, is they'll actually just destroy their generated terrain because they won't properly use masks. And I failed you guys because I didn't properly use a mask, because I was mostly going through trying to make it more speedy, just for experimental purposes. But given the time and love and care that it deserves, that's how you would do it, is throw in your mask and your mountain node and then go about your business. Hopefully that answers your question. Sorry for all the throat clearing. I really am suffering from allergies, and it sucks. Okay. So we got our stuff here ready to be built. So we want the resolution to be higher. I'm going to go with 4K, and this will take some time. So if you guys get bored, I apologize. I mean, you can always leave and come back. I'm just going to let the live stream run while it's building. I got to go. I actually have to go do my dishes. I'll get those done. Hopefully it'll be done building by the time I get back. But I'm going to keep all this the same. I'm going to keep a natural elevation. I'm going to export at 4096. Keep it as a TIFF 16-bit. I'm not going to do any tiled outputs here. And I'm not going to resample anything. If you wanted to resample, this is where these come in handy when you're exporting to Unreal Engine. So especially Unreal Engine, because Epic thinks they need to use different friggin' resampling methods. But 8129 is what I usually default to for my 8K builds, and 4033 is what I default to for my 4K builds. Just that was more for informational purposes, if you want to do this for UE4, but I'm not doing that right now. Let's see. Are you going to add vegetation in C4D? I might. I want to see how it looks first, because it might look good in Gaea, but that doesn't mean it'll look good in Cinema 4D. So if I'm happy with it in Cinema 4D, I might add vegetation, but I most certainly can, especially even if it doesn't look appealing to me personally, I might still just add it just to show you guys the workflow that I use. And using Octane Scatter will probably be the easiest method. I have other scattering tools that we can use, but anybody who's using Octane will have Octane Scatter by default, and it just comes shipped with Octane, so I'll just use that to scatter stuff around. Plus it's fast. So alright, I'll go ahead and start building this out. I gotta save it first, so we saved it. We're gonna save it to another new folder. Folder 2, that'll work. Don't have to be super detailed on that. Alrighty. So we're going to let this build out. Hopefully it won't take too long. Last time I did a 4K build with this many nodes and harsh selections, that actually didn't take as long as it used to, because the new Bleeding Edge version that I'm using is super nice. Also, I'm pretty sure I just found out where to change. Nope, I didn't. Well, shoot. Pretty sure one of these is toggle. I might have to ask Dax where the where to change the scaling of the scene is in this version. I wish I can remember. I can in the old one. If I were to open up the regular Gaea version that isn't the Bleeding Edge version, I'm pretty sure I'd be able to find it, because I used it all the time there. But all right, find the old tools tab to change the scale. Yeah, I don't know where it's at. It just disappeared. They probably took it out for this version and plan on adding it back, but I could also just be looking in the wrong areas. Let's see. It's nice that I can hide the toolbox now. That makes it really nice. Maybe they put it in a different settings. Oh, we'll attempt to continue. Anytime that Gaea says it crashed, just attempt to continue. Usually it fixes itself. And this should still be building. Yeah, it's still building. Sometimes it just kind of gets overworked and decides that it thinks it crashed, and it didn't. Workspace? No. Oh, wait. Set terrain defaults. No. That just saves the current terrain and build setting as defaults. We don't want that. Could it be in the preferences? Maybe they changed it to be in the preferences. Nope. Alright, well, I'll have to look around for it later and see where they moved it to. I'm just probably being blind and can't see it, but I'm going to let this build out. You guys, let's just take a quick breather real quick. Looks like things are building out pretty quick, so hopefully it won't take too long. I'll be right back. Apparently plan, so let's just open up Cinema 4D and I'll show you how I laid out my work area in Cinema 4D to work with Octane a little bit better. I use Octane and Gaea Render quite a bit, so I kind of set up my Cinema 4D workspace to work with them a little bit better. I'll show you how I laid it out. As soon as it decides to open. Oops, where'd it go? Where'd you go? Just disappeared. Probably still loading. Cinema 4D is so slow when you open it after you get a whole bunch of plugins installed. Yeah, building is not exporting, so it's compiling. Yeah, so you're right. It takes all the nodes and builds them out, and then it only exports the nodes that you have set up to export. And the reason why that's the case is because in World Machine, you can export any node that was exportable in World Machine by using an export node, but all that did was it made your entire you would have your whole creation of your landscape in World Machine, which can be anywhere from a few to a couple hundred nodes. Like the most nodes I've ever had in working in World Machine was like 1,000 something. Like there was a lot of nodes, lots of selections, lots of minor details being added in certain areas. The last thing you want is to have another 1,000 some odd export nodes. So the way Quad Spinner saw it, at least from some of the conversations I've had with them, that their reasoning might have changed since then, but is they wanted to make sure that the node graph was as clean and user-friendly as possible without a whole bunch of unnecessary nodes. And the export node is probably the most unnecessary node in World Machine, because all you should have to do is just say, hey, I want this node to be exported, right-click it, set, hey, I want this to be exported, and it exports. So yeah, everything in your graph needs to be built, regardless. So every little node you put on there needs to be built. But not every node needs to be exported. So you just select your certain nodes that you want to export, mark them to be exported, and then they export. In this case, we only have 3 of them. But in the past, like I said, I've exported, I've had a couple thousand nodes laid up into my node graph, but I exported a couple hundred nodes. So all they did was just add to the mess these long node graph webs. And if you look at the node graph here, this is super clean compared to what I ever had in World Machine. I mean, they're color coded nicely, they're highlighted nicely, the links are nice and clean. Like it's just a nice overall graph layout and design. I far more appreciate the graph layout in Gaea than I ever did in World Machine. So the lockdown is I'm in Utah. We didn't have a huge outbreak here in Utah. We have had people who have been affected by COVID-19 in Utah, and a few deaths, but those people who died, it's still sad that they died, and it's really unneeded, especially if it's something that they didn't have to contract, but they were already experiencing health issues, so it didn't help them that they got infected with COVID-19, but they're already having problems to begin with. So their death wasn't necessarily related to COVID-19, but it definitely didn't help. But other than that, it hasn't been too bad. I have been able to get out and go fishing and hiking. I've been away from people, and Utah is such a big, vast, open state. I live like 2 miles away from a canyon where there is nobody at ever, so I can just go up there, get away from my house, and still be away from people, and still be able to get out and see nature and all the fun stuff that I like doing. So it hasn't been too bad. If I lived in a city, like a big city, yeah, it probably would be worse. But I can say I got lucky during this whole lockdown. Hopefully you guys are doing well as well. Hopefully nobody is going insane or is sick or, I've seen any kind of economical challenges. That's one of the main concerns for my family is everybody still has a job and getting paid, but that's always a major concern with any kind of outbreak is how is it going to impact people economically. So I hope you guys are in a good boat as well. So yeah, you'll see here, this first part will be the build. When it gets to the last node that it has to build, it'll start going through the export process. The export process can still take quite some time, but usually it doesn't take as long as the build process. Luckily, things aren't taking all that long to build. Usually the data maps are the things that, data maps and erosion nodes are usually what takes the longest, especially the texture node. How many of you guys came from the Facebook page? If anybody is available to answer. Hey, look at that. And it exported. Didn't take as long to export as I thought it would. So that's good. You got the YouTube notification? Awesome. Sweet. It's nice to see that YouTube is working the way it should. I mean, in the past, it hasn't always worked. I've been demonetized and everything, and I don't know why. I don't make bad content, and I've always had enough people since 2008 to be monetized, but for some reason I'm not monetized anymore. It kind of sucks. 2 months? Holy crap. Utah has been in lockdown since I want to say the end of March, beginning of April. Like, officially lockdown. Not necessarily like we can still travel around and do stuff, but yeah, we haven't been in lockdown that long. But 2 months, yeah, that 2 months being cooped up in my house would make me go insane. Alright, so that's been exported. Let's open up Cinema 4D. Oops. I had a notification there. Oh, well. Okay, so this is how I have C4D set up. So if anybody uses Octane here, this is how I recommend setting it up. Obviously, you are free to do what you want, but this is how I recommend it. So what I have here is I have the Octane viewport as my main window here. Actually, let me take that back. This is still the default main viewport for Cinema 4D, but I've added the Octane controls to the top of it here. I go to options and I select viewport rendering. That way I can see what's being rendered in Octane in the viewport. That makes it really nice. And then all I did is I added all of the Octane options to the top here. So this is Thea Render, which is another renderer that I use. But for Octane, I added all the options here and then all of the material options here, so I don't have to go through a bunch of menus and sub-menus to get everything. And I can still use my viewport for a live viewport. So it makes working in Octane a lot faster in Cinema 4D than how I used to do it, which was launching the live viewer every time, closing it, making my changes, relaunching it. Just was a pain in the ass. So I set it up to work this way, and it's been much, much more nice. But much nicer. Okay, so in Cinema 4D, also, quick note, if you want to know how to add these in, you can do it by right-clicking on any of the open spaces And I actually have a YouTube video to show you how to do this as well. But you can customize commands. You can add new palettes or new group windows. Those are what you use to set it up. But I have a video that walks you through how to do it on my channel, so I recommend going through, and I think I have it listed under the Octane tutorial playlists or Cinema 4D tutorials. It's one of those, and then it'll walk you through how to do it. So I'm not going to spend too much time showing you how to do that in this video anyways. Alright, so let's add a plane right there, and this plane will be what we use to displace for displacement, so we can get our landscape. But as you can see here, it's only about 4 meters by 4 meters. I mean, that'll be fine if we had like a really small scene, but anytime that you're working in 3D, you want it to be as close to the original scale as possible. So if you have a basketball, you want the basketball to be scaled in the application to the size of the basketball. I don't know how big a basketball is, but you don't want it to be 20 meters by 20 meters by 20 meters or whatever. It's a radius, so math is going to be different. But you want it to be the size or around the same size that the basketball would be in real life. So no landscape is actually 4 meters by 4 meters. That looks like ours. So at least if there is a landscape that looks like that, that's only 4 meters. That would be impressive. Anyways, in this case, in Gaea, we had it set to the default value, which I can't remember what it is because I can't find where to change the scale. So I'm just going to default to what I usually default to, which is 2000. And apply. Now, the other issue that we have is now that we have such a large landscape, our clipping is all thrown off. You'll see how our plane is all being thrown off and we can't see past it, and it's being clipped. We have to change that. We go do that by going to Mode, Project, and the View Clipping, we're going to change that to huge. There we go. Now we can see the entire plane. That's 2000 by 2000. Next thing we're going to do is add a displacer. So we're going to go here, which is our, these will be our effectors. What are these called? I can't remember what these are called. No, we don't want bend. And we're just going to add a displacer. And then we're going to add the displacer to the plane. And in here, we want to make a few changes under shading first. We want to go to mapping, and we want to turn tile off. That will help fix our clipping, or not clipping, but our artifacts that we get on the edge of our displacement maps. If we turn that off, we no longer have those artifacts, those walls that are created that are super annoying. Turn that off, and that fixes it. Next, we're just going to load in our build, so our final height. I'm just going to say no. And we want to go to our plane and want to increase the segments to 1000. This is my typical workflow. There are other ways to do this. You can use like a subdivision option if you wanted, but I'm just going to increase those to 1000, or the width and height segments of the plane to 1000. Will give us about the detail that we need. I wish we can go higher than that, but we can't, unfortunately. Then we got to increase the height, so we're just going to keep all this the same except for the height, and we're going to increase that something high like 500 until we find something that looks about the same as what we had in Gaea, which that's close. So if we go back to Gaea, we look, I'm looking in this area right here and comparing. So we might need to go a little higher, maybe 550. I'm getting a phone call. Hold on. I'll give them a call back. I think 550 might be good. Next, let's not waste any time. We're going to go ahead and create a material. We're going to use a basic diffuse material, and we're going to load in our color map. And let's apply that to the plane. Oh, hold on a sec. There we go. Alright, sorry, I couldn't see what you guys were saying because I didn't have... this whole thing was covering it up. Alright, let's see here. Month and a half. YouTube, don't you dare creating fake lands. I love it. YouTube would. Fake lands, instant ban. Yeah, Martin, you gotta get outside, dude. Don't stay cooped up if you don't have to. Thanks for all the Gaea tuts. Oh, dude, no problem. For Typhon art. It is my pleasure. I love doing it. Alright. Sorry, if you missed anything, I apologize. But now, hopefully, you can see everything. So we've applied it. Let's see. We got a normal map. We're going to... Oh, hold on. What I wanted to do was actually throw in a light here. We're going to move our light down. And we're going to rotate it. And if we select our rotation tool, and then select this option right here, this will use the coordinate system for the world coordinate system. We can move the light around and it won't throw it off in weird wonky ways. So we want to have more light here, and then I don't know, maybe right there. And then I want to show you the in viewport rendering, which is not a new feature by any means, but for a lot of applications, but it is nice in this case. So now we can render inside of Octane and see our render in real time without having to open up a separate render window. So that makes that really nice. Alright, so that actually doesn't look half bad. We got our landscape, we got our texture, it looks good. Now we need to apply our normal. And the reason why I wanted to show you the normal separately is there is a difference, but like I said, it's not going to be one of those things that's going to be a major game changer. There we go. Does look better, but like I said, it's going to be a hit and miss depending on what you got. So what you have, if I don't talk like a Uton. Holy crap. Alright, so let's find a good angle here, and I really like this bar shot, but I want to overlook the entire landscape. So maybe about right there, maybe? Let's see. Obviously going on small walks and whatever I can, but all the parks and public land is shut down. Oh, no good, dude. Yeah, Utah shut down our public parks for less than like 2 weeks or something like that, and then they reopened them. There just hasn't been a whole lot of cases here, so they aren't too worried. Obviously, people are still taking like precautions, but some of the precautions people are taking, I think, are kind of too much. I think it's always good to be more safe than sorry, obviously, but some people are just blowing it way out of proportion, in my opinion. Getting another phone call. All right, so let me take this call just real quick. I'll be right back. But it's good to keep your health up, man. Family is healthy, that's good. As long as your family and yourself are healthy, then we can't really complain. All right. Now the next thing after this is we still have like really barren details in our landscape. Even though the overall shape is nice, the color map is actually not too bad, in my opinion. We need to add a little bit more detail, specifically in the bump. So let's go to our bump and add a Cinema 4D noise. The reason why I'm using a Cinema 4D noise is because, or not Cinema 4D, but Octane noise, is because C4D's noises tend to repeat, and I don't like that. Octanes don't. Alright, so first thing first, let's increase the omega to about 9. I think 9 will be good. And then the octaves, we're going to increase quite a bit. And you'll see how this bump is coming in. We essentially want there to be a lot of bump, and this is where I say it's going to be more arbitrary, because I'm not making any certain selection. I'm just adding in detail, so further shots, further away terrain looks better than not, but mostly focusing on the closer terrain. And if we increase the noise a bit, you'll see how we're getting that detail coming in here. And if we decrease the omega, it starts fading out the detail and fading back in the detail. So we want there to be just enough to give a little more detail here and there, but not too much, because it won't look natural. And I think maybe 8 might do it. And then the gamma and contrast will just kind of help make it look so it's not appearing across the entire terrain uniformly. So if we just increase the contrast a bit, you'll kind of see what's happening here. Some areas are becoming more noisy than others, and same thing if we were to decrease the gamma. Just kind of help control the noise a tad bit more. All right, let's look at an aerial shot real quick. The aerials look good. It's not a bad looking terrain. It's got some good detail. Let's change the lighting around a bit. We've got that, looks really nice. About right there, maybe. Looks pretty decent. I think we're done with the material for the time being, so we'll just close that out. And at this point, we'll play with the lighting a bit more. So let's click on our tag here, and we're going to increase the sun size so we get softer shadows. We don't need it too much, because we're not doing like a dusk shot like this where the shadows would be really soft. We're doing it mostly, I like this lighting here, so this is kind of like afternoon, maybe early evening maybe. And so the sun size, we don't want it to be too large to make super soft shadows, but we want it to make somewhat soft shadows. So maybe 3, maybe even less, maybe 2.5 will work pretty well. Alright, so yeah, that lighting I think would be just fine for now. We also want to change this blending and start angle to be up higher, so we don't get the black sky on the horizon. We don't want that. Alrighty, so we got some really good detail here. It's not a bad looking terrain by the slightest, in my opinion, if I do say so myself. I do like this rock material that we have going across right here. It looks really nice. And then we got our sandbar, or sand pit area. That's pretty cool. Let's move the light over here a bit so I can adjust it a bit better. Now we just got to figure out some interesting shadows, which I think this might be good. Ooh. I do like sunset shots. I think I use them way too much though, which is why I'm going for this more like day look rather than sunset. We might actually need to increase the power a bit too. So let's increase it to 1.5. And it could just be me. My monitor could just be dark. But it just looked a little bit too dark in my opinion. We got some nice shadows, and we're also still using just the basic direct lighting render. So let's change that to path trace. That'll help with our lighting to be a little bit more natural. And let's get closer down to the bottom, and we'll add some plants and some vegetation to this, just to kind of make it look a little bit more appealing. But we need to also get the right scale for it. So our noise at this scale is a little bit too large. We need it to be smaller so it looks a little more natural. But to do that, we need to load in a plant. And I have log work, so let's browser. I don't think I have any grasses. I do have this. Might work. I had a lot of grass at one point, but I don't have enough money to buy the licenses for the newer Cinema 4D for my plugins. Some of them included an upgrade for free, but not all of them. And the one I was using was I can't remember what it's called now. I hate it when I'm tired and I forget crap. It was kind of like Force Pack Pro, but for Cinema 4D. What was it? Someone's gonna correct me here. But it had a lot of grasses, but I don't have a license for it for R21, and that's what I'm using. But I might have some that I can use that I have made. So let me see if I can find any that look good that I've made. There we go. That's she. My dog is hidden my door. Let's try to load one up here. We got... Where did I put them? I think I have them in here. 3D models in nature. Dylan's models and materials, that'll do it. Grass patches. High resolution grass, yeah. Got some OBJs here. This will be from... This is actually some grass that was made by MW Visworks. So I think I got these on Gumroad. I downloaded them from Gumroad. But it's an entire like work. So let's import that. So that did exactly what I thought it would. I don't want that. I want to merge them. So let's see. Merge project. Oh. Where are they? Right here. Copy that. Merge into this. They're going to be super small compared to the terrain. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a camera for this shot right here. We'll probably change it around later. That way, if we move the default camera, which is what we're using, we can go back to our Octane camera, which will be that shot. I like to use multiple cameras. I mean, it's good common practice to use multiple cameras anyways. So, I actually haven't seen if I can get a free update to R21 for, the hell is that freaking program called? I hate it when I forget stuff. Hey Bob, you should be able to watch from the beginning. I do have Plant Factory, so that is one of the benefits of being a Vue user for so long. I was actually I was alpha testing for Plant Factory as well. But I don't want to go through the process of making plants after we spent so much time making a terrain. I just want to use one that is already made, so I don't have to worry about making it. Let's see. Forester. Forester, that's what it is. Oh my goodness. I can't believe I forgot about that. I should remember that because one of my favorite vehicles for a long time was the Subaru Forester, and that's how I put two and two together, but I mean I didn't. So I think I'll see if I have an actual upgrade to R21 for this that they're willing to give me, or if not, then see if I have to purchase it. If I have to, it will be a little bit longer, but for the time being, I can't use Forester, unfortunately. CRS. Can't remember shit. Okay, so that grass actually won't work because I gotta separate it from the overall mesh, and I don't want to do that. That's gonna take too much work. I am in an exceptionally lazy mood, so let's find another one. I have so much of them. I have my own. I have some that I've purchased. I mean, the list goes on. So I mean, it's not that I don't have nothing. I just need to find something that I want to work with. Visworks, not Visworks. The one I was just using didn't come from Gumroad. Actually, it was this Vertex Hypergrass. This stuff is awesome. I recommend going on to Gumroad and looking for Vertex Hypergrass. It's super nice. And they give you the basic geometry as well as patches. So they just take all of their stuff, put into nice little patches so you can scatter them around really easily. I'm just going to use a couple of these. So we have different versions here. We have tall, short, sprout, medium, all that fun stuff. So I think what we'll do is we'll just take one of each. I got to merge them all separately, I think. I think an easier way to do this will be using the content browser. Probably. No, because that's going to cause a lot of problems as well. I can't actually search in the content browser. I have to go through the directories one by one, and that's cumbersome. So we'll just merge one at a time here. Won't be that big of a deal. Geometry patches. Let's do medium V1. And we'll throw in, I think maybe 5 will be good. So we'll just throw in a medium, a short. It doesn't really matter. This is all just for visualizing anyways. It's not like we're trying to make things picture perfect here. We'll do some sprout. And do tall. We'll do one tall. So that'll be 4. Let's do one more. Yeah, let's do one more. My dogs are throwing a ruckus upstairs. We'll do a patch. Square probably would have been better than round, but whatever. We'll do tall 8. There we go. Alright. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to load in an Octane scatter, which will be here. Let's go ahead and close this. I can't see what you guys are saying when that's in the way. I didn't load up the map, the textures. That's annoying. Okay, well, that's fine. We'll fix that in a minute. We need to get this grass down to where we are looking. So for now, let's go here, and here is where our grass is. All right, that's super small compared to our landscape, which is to be expected because we have such a large landscape. No, don't be this way. It's gonna be that way. Just copy this one, delete this one. Not going to find that one ever again. Disappeared. We'll just scatter it. Now, before we can scatter, oh, come on. There we go. We have to make this landscape an object, or else it's not going to scatter properly. So we're going to do is right-click on plane, and then go to current state to object. And that will make an object of our plane, which will be our landscape. And then we can turn this off. We can actually just hide it by doing this as well. I mean, you can do one or the other, it doesn't matter. Move it to the bottom. Apparently it's going to bug out on me. So there we go. All right, now we can hide that. There. All right. So that'll be our object. Now we can scatter properly. So if we go to Octane Scatter, we'll change this to surface, and we'll drop our plane in the surface. And that should scatter our little doohickeys around, but we need our materials as well. So we need to go find our materials. Should have just been in here. Maybe I should have did the FBX. Probably would have been better. We're just going to use 2 different albedos, I guess. Yeah, 2. We'll use this one and that one. So, hold on. I think I can just drop those in. Should be able to just drop those in. vertex. Where did I put them? There you are, here. Plants and vertex library, right there. Okay. Textures. Let's go to 4K and let's drop in wild green, aged, the bump, the gloss, the normal, the speck, and the rough. So we got the color, the bump, the gloss, the normal, the rough, and the specular. And let's see if we can just... Actually, we'll load these in. Color. Drop. Oops, I'm going to drop all 6 in there. No, I'm going to drop 1. Drop that right there. Say no. There we go. Now we got our color in there. Actually, we want to convert these to Octane materials. So we'll go to material. Where's it at? That one is the convert material button. Now they're Octane materials. We'll delete those. Delete. And I don't know what that one is. We'll delete that. Alright, so specular. So we'll do bump first because that's the next one in line. So there's the bump. Copy that over. I can't see if you guys are saying anything. Nope. Alright. Then our gloss, which we need. This is already glossy. Good. So we'll put that in. Leave that out for the time being. Normal. We'll drop normal in there. Because we're going to use our specular material, not the glossy one. So we're just going to drop our spec in there. And then we're going to drop our roughness in there. There we go. So we got our color, our specular, our roughness, our bump, and our normal. Don't have a displace. We don't have to worry about that anyways. And then we're just going to apply this material to all of our... I'm just going to stick with the one, just for visualization purposes. Otherwise, I would apply a couple different textures because it'll look more natural, but I don't really see a reason to do that right now. The workflow is the same. It'll just take really too much time to do it, so... Alright, so that should be scattering. Let's see, they're probably still way too small for our landscape. I'm going to make a cube. This cube would be about the size that I am, so I am 1.98 meters. I'm just going to do 1.98 and, oops, 1.98 and 1.98. So that'll be about as tall as I am. And then we'll move the cube into our camera view, wherever it went. It's up there somewhere. There it is. This way. I believe there's a way to actually align the object. So we do, I think it's mesh? No. Tools? Select. Which one is it? Create? Mesh. Axis. Yeah, we center object to, center to parent, center to, so if we make the cube a child of our camera, theoretically this should work, and then we have our cube selected and we hit mesh, axis, center to parent. That should move our cube to our camera, theoretically. Maybe not. And we can move it out. No, I've lost it. It's alright, we'll just do it again. Oh man, I am getting tired of talking. Oh, right here will work. Alright, so cube to our camera. And then we do mesh, axis center to parent. Then we move that out, and then we can move our cube, supposedly, out. Let's move out over the Octane camera, though. There we go. That is a lot easier. Okay. That makes life easy. Now we just got to move this cube down until it intersects. Which looks like it did. Where'd it go? Too far down. There we go. So that'll be about the height of me, and that will help visualize what we need to do with the bump as well as how tall the plants should be if they are scattering properly. So we probably want to move the cube closer to the edge so we don't see that much intersecting foreground. It's probably like right there. So we're right on the edge. Alrighty. Cool. Now we can go to our Octane camera, and we can move our Octane camera into position. Alright. There. Alrighty. We can hide the cube. There we go. Now we have our camera set up at the height that we want it to be at. Now we got to figure out how these plants are being scattered. Alright, so we need more plants, obviously. I mean, 1,000 is not enough for such a large landscape. And we also want to bring the normal line down, I believe, but let's increase the count first. If they're even showing up, why are they not showing up? There should be... These are actually geometry meshes. They shouldn't need opacities. So, what's going on here? The fun of working with issues in 3D, right? 1,200,000. Let's see if that'll be enough. Yeah, I'm starting to see them poke up. So if we were to turn off the viewport rendering, you can see that they are being created. Yeah, I can make the grass bright pink. That could work. So we could just make a quick material here. And that's what I used to do in Vue all the time, was, you know, make things pink just to see it. And we'll just do you can do red as well. Pink will work though. But come on, work with me here. That'll do. Just toss that on. Oops, I didn't want to cover it up. Come on. There we go. All right, we'll add this one back. It should take the first material in line. So if we were to just add the pink material in, come on, let me drop it. There we go. And then just move it so it's first in line. Should work. I gotta change the scattering down a little bit. We'll just go to 200,000 again. And we might have to increase the scale of them too. So the scale will have to be increased. And we're gonna randomize them a bit. So yeah, I don't wanna blow that up. That would be so bad. But I've pushed these things to the limit so many times. So it's probably why my house... No, that's a story for another time. Never mind. I was going to say something about smoke and fires, but it wasn't my computer. It was something else. All right. We want to throw in MoGraph and effector. We want to do a randomizer. Random. And we're going to toss that into the effector right there. And then we're going to change the parameters. We don't want to change the position, but we do want to change the scale and the rotation. And I'm going to use a uniform scale, and we're just going to change them to be, I don't know, 0.5. And then the rotation on H right here, that'll be, let's just do 550, I guess. Some high number. And now let's do our viewport rendering. I need more water. I think the plants are just still too small. Is the thing. Just use some really ridiculous options here. Move the random down here. All right. We'll just change the actual size of them here. So if I were to take them out, use our scale tool, use that, and then we just increase the scale by, I don't know, let's do 400%, so 440 I guess. Let's see how big they are now. That might do it. I can see the white dot there. Yeah, there we go. There's our plants. All right. They're coming in now. There is a way to make the grass blades face the camera. I cannot remember off the top of my head right now, actually, but there is a way to do it. I've done it before in the past. They actually aren't taking this pink color either, which is super strange, but whatever. I found them. They're available now. But yeah, there is. And there's also a way to make it so they don't grow on the back faces of geometry. It's called backface culling. There's a way to do it in Cinema 4D with native tools, but they're kind of cumbersome, and I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. But other programs like Forester have those built in, so you don't have to worry about finding them. That's why I recommend Forester. I couldn't recommend them enough. They're really great. Yeah, I can't remember how to do it off the top of my head inside of Cinema 4D. Let's increase the amount we have here again. We're also going to change where they're being distributed. So we're just going to use 1,200,000. Did I do the right amount? Yeah. Okay. I essentially just want enough to cover up the camera here. These plants aren't the best right now. I'm not doing very much with them, but they are really nice looking plants. Trust me on it. I've used them in other renderings that you guys have probably seen, but I'm just not putting in a lot of time and effort into it right now because it's mostly just showing the workflow. The landscape itself looks nice. The texture could still use some work. So let's change our bump on this real quick. And we're going to turn off the viewport rendering for now because it's slowing things down. Okay, so if we increase the omega a bit more, as well as the octaves by just maybe 1 or 2. See what that looks like. That's a little better. 14? Let's go to 14. Yeah. Let's increase those a bit more, so it kind of appears in different areas. I think that looks a little bit better than it did before, but not by much. All right, this still needs some work. I would normally go around and play around with some actual textures, maybe some mega scans, maybe, or maybe some other textures that I took myself and apply them in different areas. But this overall color map from Gaea isn't looking too bad. Yeah. Like I said, when we were building the train, you can export different masks in Gaea to do what you want, including scattering. And that's normally what I would do. But I didn't in this case. It just wasn't something that I wanted to do. But yeah, totally. You could load in your map and put them into the the shader here, which is what I used if you go back and watch the tutorial I made, and it wasn't a tutorial, it was actually a speed run, a time lapse of a Nordic mountain peak. I used a mask from Gaea to scatter my vegetation around. And actually, you can use the vegetation data node in Gaea to help simulate where you would be scattering vegetation on your landscape more naturally. So if you were to go back to Gaea, so if we go back to Gaea and we throw up our data node for vegetation, in here somewhere, it's down here, if it'll scroll. Growth, not vegetation, but growth. You can simulate where plants are growing on your landscape using that. So that would be nice. And one of the, I want to say that's like a callback to geoglyph, if any of you guys use geoglyph. Speedrun 80% to make a fake mountain. Say what? I don't quite get it, Sauce. But anyways, if we go back to geoglyph, there was a node on there that was like a forest. It created like fake noise that you can color into like different forest colorations. So it looked like there were forests growing in different areas along your landscape, which made having like what appeared to be trees growing on your landscape at further distances from your camera, so you didn't actually have to use 3D models. It just used noise patterns that simulated the look of like trees bulbing up and creating a canopy, and that was really nice. So it's kind of like a throwback to that, in my opinion. All right, so we want to decrease the normal low and normal high so they only appear on certain slopes of the landscape. But before we do that, we want to make sure that they're always pointing up. And to do that, we need to change the normal line down. So we're going to decrease it down to almost 0. I always like to have a little bit so there's some variation. So 0.05 will work pretty well. And that will ensure that the plants are always pointing up off the surface rather than pointing in other directions. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I always... I used to call them speedruns back in the day when I was doing View stuff. I actually have old View speedruns that I had called speedruns. I had to rename the titles to time-lapse. So, yeah, it's one of those things where I often forget the word I'm thinking of, and it's on the tip of my tongue, and I'm like, screw it, speedrun. We'll just stick with speedrun. And so I did, and then I was like, it's a time-lapse. All right, anyways. We're going to add more plants here. So we're just going to add 2 million here. Let's see what we have here. And 2 million's not a whole lot. Actually, I've used a lot more than that, especially in View. I've had upwards of like 1 billion plants growing on my landscape before. Octane is not going to be able to handle that many. Cinema 4D starts to get a little bit boggled and create some problems, but let's see if we can get these growing on just the shallow areas of my landscape instead of the steep areas. So we're going to decrease the normal high so they only grow on the flat areas. That should help reduce the total number of plants we have. So they're still growing here and they're growing down there, but they're not growing on the edges. Let's turn off Viewport Rendering. So they're still kind of growing. I can see the little black bars. So let's we either have to increase the normal low or decrease the high. It's been a minute. I'm used to using Forester, so I haven't used Octane Scatter in quite a while. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay. So they're not growing on the steep edges anymore, but I think I decreased it too much. So I think I want 30. Maybe 30 will work. Yeah, 30 will work. We could probably go a little higher. Let's try, what were we at before? 50 something? Let's go to 35. Some are appearing on some of the shallower edges on the steeper areas, but I think that will work. I think that'll work. Okay. And then maybe let's add some more plants. 5 million. Let's see how that goes. They should all be kind of varied as well because of that random effector. And let's Viewport Rendering. Need more plants. Could throw in some rocks, I suppose. some nice, good hero rocks for this very close, oh geez, see, like I said, I always lose the word and they're on the tip of my tongue. You got the close, mid, and far range, so like this freaking area right here. That's what I'm gonna say. I know I'm very technical. Okay, so they actually grew, so nice. All right, so they are covering the ground quite a bit there. I'm not gonna go spend too much more time on the plants. I think overall it's looking fine for what we were doing. I mean, if I just spend a lot, I usually spend a couple hours, and when I say a couple, like a couple hours a day for about a week on some of the projects I make that look really good. But in this case, we've only spent, the last couple hours working on this on one day. We got some pretty interesting results. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the vegetation for now. We'll turn it back on for the final render. And I want to adjust the light, so the light has the shadows coming, the sun's more facing towards the camera. Maybe. It's all trial and error still, so we're gonna find out here. We want that. There we go. All right. So this is gonna increase it in the atmosphere. So we want these shadows. So we just want to rotate it. I guess the sun was already facing the camera pretty well. I mean, that's facing the camera right there. We got these awesome shadows. More up in the air. Maybe about right there. I like these far shadows and the way that looks in the distance, like this area, like this bluff. Looks really cool. I am not going to add clouds. I have VDBs that I made, and there are some that you can download for free on my Gumroad store that you can use as just like, it's like a thank you to people who have always watched my stuff and participated and actually helped make my channel what it is currently. I'm not going to throw those in right now, but I will add distance effect, which is really hard to get in Octane on its own. And I'll show you how I do that. It's really quite easy using it with Octane, but it does add quite a bit to the amount of time it needs to render. So I just want to make sure I got my lighting right, and then I'll throw that in so we have a distance effect, but no clouds this time around. But if you want to play with what I would be using, you can download, I believe I have 2 VDBs on my Gumroad that are free. If they're not, let me know. One of them at least should be. And you can download that, and that's what I would use. And I would add them over the top of the mountains over here, and they cast shadows really nicely, and that's what I would use them for. But not this time, sorry. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and actually start making that distance effect real quick. So I'm going to use the default camera for this because I need to go up and up. There we go. And this is a very large landscape, so we need to really play with this really nicely, or else it could crash Cinema 4D. So before we do anything, I'm going to save it, because that would suck. Put in all that time and effort and lose everything. Let's see, we can save project as, just call it Untitled. That works. I just really like how the actual color data turned out in this. It looked, in my opinion, it looks really good. I mean, excuse me for patting myself on the back, but I'm going to. It looks really nice, in my opinion. And especially these areas right here where like the sand comes off. It should be under Dylan Yarbrough. If you can't find it under Dylan Yarbrough, you'll find it under PWN Design. One of those two. Okay, so we're going to add this volume. We have to find out where our camera is real quick. So our camera is right here on this edge. So we're going to use this volume. Before we do anything, we want to increase the voxel size in the editor to 1000. It's as high as we can go. We can't go any higher than that. And then we're going to increase it on the axis to make it as long as the landscape. So we need to increase it here. If when it gets large enough, you'll start getting this black volume box. That's fine. But what's more important is you'll get these little areas right here that you can stretch to increase it on one axis. like that. Maybe not that long. And then we're going to move this closer to the camera. About right there. And we want to make sure that this doesn't extend past the landscape too much, because this is going to add quite a bit of time to our render and uses a lot of resources, so we don't want to use more than what we need. And then we're going to increase it in the depth like this, like that, and like that. And then we're just going to move this down so that it covers that area, but just outside the camera. You'll see how it casts a shadow. That's not a good thing, but we'll fix that. And it's not quite as long as our landscape, so we're going to increase the length about right there. And about right there. I think that will do for now. We'll see how that looks. We might increase it across the rest of the length of the landscape, but we'll see how it goes. So let's go back to our volume. And we're not going to change anything here, but we are going to go to our medium. We're going to throw in a fog medium, and then we're going to change a lot of this stuff. So we're going to change the absorption to white, pure white. And then we're going to change the scattering also to pure white. Though you could, if you want, change it to like this lighter blue color. So you grab the color picker and then just kind of hover over this light blue color. That will be a little bit better. It's not quite all white, but there is some blue to it, so that makes it look kind of nice. And then we're going to decrease the density quite a bit until we get it just barely fading in. We have to have it fade in, because if we don't, it starts casting a weird shadow, which we have to work with and try to resolve. So then we don't have to worry about the volume step length, but we do want the scattering phase to be more so the light scattering through it at us rather than in it. We want it to come through. That way we don't get that weird shadow. And then we also get a good distance fog look. And we're going to play with it a little bit here. So let's go back to our camera so we know what we're looking at. And we need it to be higher than what the camera can see and longer than what the camera can see. So if we were to see, we have our bar right here, that's the edge of it. We want to move it so it's more that way, so it's not in camera, and then we want to move it up so that our bars are not visible above it or below it. So we might have to increase the size so it doesn't clip right here. So let's go back. And I'm going to turn off the viewport rendering real quick. And we're just going to increase the size here, so it intersects with the ground. There we go. All right, that should do it, and then it should also help it intersect with the, doesn't intersect with the camera's viewport. There we go. All right. Default camera Octane. There we go. All right, so we got our volume going right now, so let's turn on the viewport rendering again real quick, and then let's play with this so we get it how we want it. So right now it's still kind of maybe too dense, or maybe it's too far away from the camera or something. We'll have to kind of play around with it a bit to decide. But for the time being, let's just go ahead and increase the scattering phase. I like 0.8 quite a bit. I find that to be a good number. And we're also going to change it from path tracing to direct lighting, just for the time being, until we can figure this out. Direct lighting is going to make the volume look a little bit weird, but we'll at least be able to work with it a little bit faster. Okay, so we're going to do 0.8 right here. Come on, 0.8. You son of a biscuit-eating monster. That's 0.8. There we go. Now you can see how we have that distance going on, so that's pretty nice. And we're going to play with the density here. We're going to decrease density a little bit more. That was too much. It's very finicky. Oops. I want higher. A little higher. Okay. So I think that's about as low as we're probably going to be able to get. In this case, what we're going to want to do then is we're going to stretch it across the rest of the landscape. I think that'll help diffuse it a little bit more, but you can start seeing how we're getting that distance look coming in right here in the midground. Foreground. See, I told you guys I would remember the words eventually. Foreground, midground, background. So we've got our foreground, which isn't encapsulated in it. But we have our midground, which is, but it has this nice distance look to it. And then we have our background that's completely encompassed in it, but it's probably just a bit too much. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the camera and we're going to take it to the rest of the landscape. So let's move it up and around. And you'll notice, like I said earlier, I've kind of figured out a way to make it so Octane doesn't crash on me all the bloody time. So it's good. RTX acceleration. No, that's not a random question. That's actually a good question, and I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't think Cinema 4D does, but I mean, it's something that I'm actually interested in knowing myself, because I plan on getting new cards to replace my Titans, and I want them to be RTX enabled. So, good question. I don't know, but I will find out, and then you guys will know as soon as I tell you, unless you find out before me. And if you do, please let me know. I know Octane supports RTX acceleration, so if Octane does, I don't think it matters if Cinema 4D does or not, because they are two different programs. But if you do find out before I do, please let me know. I'm quite interested myself. All right, so we've taken up the rest of the landscape here, so let's see what it looks like. I think what we might need to do in this case is, instead of decreasing the density here even more, I'm actually going to try just straight up 0.001 and see if that will make much of a difference. No. All right. Okay. 1.0. What was it? 1.017 or something like that. Let's try 1.01 or 0.00101. Such a small number, but we are working in a large area, so that makes sense. And you'll see how that shadow is being casted by our volume. That's no bueno. We don't want that. That is the drawback to this method, is most certainly is not perfect, but it is still plausible to use. Yeah, I have a couple of images out there that I made where I've used this method and they looked good, and it is a lot easier to do this than export a Z-depth and use Photoshop, because believe it or not, I hate Photoshop. I used Photoshop forever, and I don't like working in it. Alright, we're going to decrease this bright white in the absorption. Maybe right there. Let's see how that helps. Another issue with using this method is if you use an HDRI, it affects the HDRI as well. That is super lame. There's a lot of drawbacks to using this method for sure. But as you can see, it does work. Might not use it in this case though. This case, we might not be using this volume at all. Or we can just reduce the size again, because that looked a lot better than it did before. That's probably what we'll end up doing. Keep it more towards the back, probably. Let's, hopefully it didn't freeze. If it did freeze, then it's a good thing we saved it, because it looked like it did. Okay, well, it looks like it froze. Let's end that. Lame. It's alright. It's known to happen. Yeah, I would love that if Octane is to, or Otoy is to be believed for sure. I mean, I do have my qualms with Otoy. And again, I do get in on a lot of early access programs. I remember using Octane back before Otoy was even Otoy. It was published by somebody else. I can't remember what it's called, or what the company was called. But I was using Octane way back then. It was like 2007 or something like that. I was still in high school at the time, and it was free to download then. It isn't anymore, but I'm not opposed to companies charging for their programs. Obviously, they need to make money, and I understand that. But when Otoy bought them, a lot of good stuff happened, but also a lot of bad stuff. And one of the bad things, in my opinion, was their subscription model. I hate subscription models. I do. I've never liked them, but I understand why they are necessary, unfortunately. But I still trust Otoy to give us good information regarding like the what am I trying to say? The potential ability of increased performance and stuff like that. I can trust them on that. Alright, well, this was before we added the volume. That's fine, because I don't think I was going to end up keeping the volume, but now you guys know of a decent workaround to get depth. It might not be perfect, and in this use case, I think the landscape is probably just too large for it to work well. I might have to decrease it to something like 1,000 or maybe even less than that, but for the most part, I was actually quite pleased with this. So let's, considering how much time and energy we spent on it, let's render. Yeah, I agree with that. If they have a bunch of other programs that are included, like plugins and whatnot, that the price is justified. Like with Octane, obviously the subscription model, you have like an a la carte option where you can get it for pretty much every program you use, and get for Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, Houdini, all those programs. So it's well worth the price. I'm not saying that the price of the subscription isn't worth it, or that the subscription model they have isn't necessary, because it is, and they actually offer a lot in their subscription. But I'm an old school guy, I guess. I mean, I'm not very old, but I remember back in the day when you bought a program and you owned the program, and any updates that they made for that program you just got. And I miss those days, because I remember going to Best Buy when I was barely in high school, and I had a job. I did tile work, and I would save up my money, and I would go buy Photoshop, like the new versions of Photoshop, but I would be like 3 or 4 versions behind on the latest version of Photoshop, because I didn't have a whole lot of money, because I was a kid. So what ended up happening is I would go to Best Buy, I'd buy like Photoshop 6 or 7, whatever it was at the time, before they came out with the CS versions. And I remember the first CS version I bought was CS2, and I still have that copy to this day, and I still have it installed on my computer, and it is still the only version of Photoshop that I use. And today I hate it. Yes, I used Photoshop way too much on a daily basis for a really long time, and I absolutely refuse to use Photoshop except for just minor tweaks. So, and minor tweaks as in making sure that contrast and brightness is looking good and the color is the way I want it, and that's about it. Or if I'm going to be using a Z depth mask to add distance in my renders. But yeah, it's a program that I'm not necessarily thrilled to open up and use on a daily basis anymore. Let's look at it without the plants real quick. Oops. I need to go over here. I want to see how many people are still viewing because I'm about ready to cut this off and call it good for the day. With the plants, it's still good. If I had the masks from Gaea to use on the plants for distributing them, that would be much better. Obviously, I didn't distribute or export those, so I think without the plants, it looks a lot better. Maybe not up close, and I could paint them in. I can paint a vertex map, drop the resolution of the plane. Go in there and paint a vertex map, and then just use the vertex map as a place to populate the plant. You know what? Why don't I just fucking do it? Excuse my French. All right, so just real quick, I guess. So we'll hide this one. This will be our high resolution plane, and then we need to bring this back. We need to drop this down, so vertex maps can be quite heavy to paint on with larger meshes. So we're going to decrease the segments, and then we're going to go back to our default camera. Make sure we know where we're painting by making sure where our camera is here. If I was going to use a photo editing program now for anything, it would probably be Adobe Lightroom. Because I don't need all those tools that come with Photoshop for what I do every day now. And Lightroom gives me all the options I need, but I don't own it, so I don't use it. I wish I did. But they have a subscription model, and I don't want to subscribe because I don't have the money to subscribe. And half the programs you get in the subscriptions I wouldn't use anyways. But they are nice programs. I will give them that. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to paint from here around there. To do that, we go here. We paint. Where's the character? Joint skin. It's one of these. Weight tool. I think it changed in the newer versions. Yeah, yellow it with GIMP. Yeah, GIMP would be great. I mean, I would have to go through and just try to figure it out. But I mean, I used GIMP too, not very much, but I did use GIMP. I prefer Photoshop over GIMP, but I can appreciate GIMP and its community. Its community is actually a pretty good community. I like them. I think it's the weight tool. I could be wrong. And I don't think I can do it in the live view. So we gotta go to Viewport, and it was just under character and then paint, but it's changed in this newer version, I think. Commands, mirror, weight, bind, create. Or maybe they've moved it. Learning. Let's see here. Modes. So there'd be like a paint mode or something. Sculpting. I do want to get into more sculpting in Cinema 4D. That would be great. That is something I want to do. They must have moved it or something. It used to be just character and then like a paint option. It's gotta be one of these. I think we can probably add a tag. What would it be under? Cinema 4D tags or Octane tags? No, it's gonna be under. There's like a vertex color. No, it's not going to be vertex color. Oh, I like Blender. Blender I think is great, especially now with 2.8. I didn't quite like Blender's UI before 2.8. It's very much one of those programs where you can tell it was developed by developers rather than artists or people who had any artistic input. Not that the Blender team isn't artistic, but their recent changes are phenomenal. I like it. I actually have it downloaded right here. I haven't used much of it yet, but I am doing a COVID-19 primary getting started in 3D for free series that I haven't made a whole lot of videos on because I've been busy, but it was essentially just a introduction on how to use Blender, which is free, so you don't have to buy anything, and then how to use a free version of Gaea to make landscapes and start making cool stuff. So, and it's intended for kids because it's better for kids to learn and keep learning while they're locked down rather than watching TV and playing video games. At least that's my opinion as a parent. It's just not good for kids to just sit and watch TV all day, and if they can be at a computer learning, that might still not be as good as getting out and about and actually doing stuff, but it's better than just mindlessly watching aired TV shows or playing video games. But that's just my opinion. I didn't use 2.7. I used Blender before. I think I didn't use Blender at all during the 2.x phase. I started using Blender in like the 1 point something or even before that. But I didn't stick with it very long, probably because it just was too janky for me. I have a habit of using really new, like early adopting programs and then just not sticking with them unless I buy it and then I stick with it. Anyways, I'm having a hard time figuring out how to paint this vertex map now. I'm going to have to go through and one of the main reasons why I make video tutorials is because I can go back and watch them, and if I forget something, I can be like, oh, I did it myself and I forgot how, but this reminds me how to do it. That's part of the reason why I make videos as well, is because my memory is just bad, I guess. I just don't remember stuff. So it's in here somewhere, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm just gonna say, yeah, we're done now for the time being. This is a not a bad looking landscape or texture map that we have applied to it. So let's do just a quick viewport render, or not viewport render, but like a picture viewer render, and then we'll call it good. So first we want to set it up. So we want to edit render settings, and we want to add Octane, and we want to output it, I don't know, something high, 1920 by 1080, I guess. Oop. Apparently tab didn't want to work. And then we'll call that good for now. Now let's just go ahead and render it in the picture viewer. Should show me the picture viewer. Maybe I didn't do it right. Oh, and we're still using the low res. Okay, screw that. Let's go back to here and hide that and bring this back in. Now let's render the picture viewer. Be interesting to see the difference between models of the landscape here. So we have this compared to that. Low resolution, high resolution. You can see the major differences there. It's pretty nice. So what I think I like the most about this, considering the amount of work that we put into it, is the mid-ground details I think are good. They're not perfect by any means, but they're pretty good. And then the background details I think are great. I like how the sun is hitting this ridge right here and bringing all this into light. You can see the crevice here created by the breaker node. Looks really nice. And then I like the difference in like where there's like plants, vegetation and dirt, and then rock. It looks really nice. So anyways, I hope I didn't bore you guys. It's been about 3 hours and 15 minutes since I started this. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. I hope you guys learned some stuff. Thank you for all the questions. I appreciate you guys getting involved and, you know, following along and asking a lot of questions. I hope I answered all your questions. If you have any that I didn't quite touch on as well as you would want, or if I missed any, you could always contact me on Facebook or, you know, on the comments sections in my videos, or even on YouTube through a, you know, direct message or whatever. So hopefully I'll get I'll go through and remind myself on how a lot of this vertex map painting stuff works, and then I think next weekend what I'll do is I'll make a tutorial specifically talking about maybe rivers, lakes, and oceans. Probably focus more on the lakes and rivers part, and then we'll export some maps so we can actually distribute plants across our landscape the way we should. And I'll look into see if I can get Forester, because I don't want to go through and dive through menus with you guys trying to bring in plants. I would rather just have them be available for this kind of stuff. So anyways, thanks for following along. I'm glad you had a blast, Sauce. You are the man. Watch it from the beginning. Yeah, there is some stuff to go through at the beginning. How the hell to use Gaea. Yeah, I have some beginner tutorials that you can go through and watch as well. If you guys want more beginner stuff on these live streams, we can definitely do that. I think walking through how to use the node graph and the different nodes here was pretty beginnerish, I guess. We don't have a whole lot going on. We're not using a whole lot of masks and selections, so this is probably a good starting base for you guys as well. So anyways, thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, and I'll see if I can get back in touch with you guys next weekend. Anyways, thanks a bunch, guys.